What up, everybody? Welcome. It is Friday. Whoop, whoop, whoop. We made it to the end of the week. It's, wait a minute. I got to have fireworks for that, right? Made it to the end of the week. You put the time in. Still got to get through the day, though. Okay. Still got to get through the day. And those that are really hustling, that really work and are dedicated to it, not even looking at the clock, right? You're just thinking, dude, it's another day. I need to get through this day. And then once I punch out at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, depending on when you came to work, dude, y'all in the field, 5 o'clock ain't when you get off. You're getting off at 4 because you know what time you came in. So, and some of you not even started your day yet. You're out on the West Coast and you're still just nestled up in the bed next to your code book, just you fell asleep at night last night with the code book on you and you woke up and yeah, I know how it works. I know how it is, code nerds. Hey, welcome to Coffee Hour. If you've never joined me before, thanks for joining us here on Coffee Hour. We talk about just about anything, any topic when it comes to the National Electrical Code. So, and just about anything else, okay? So, as always, do me a favor. Let me know who you are, where you're from, what you got going on. If you're new, the first time listener, we'd love to hear it. Let us know. If you're our share warriors out there who share our stuff on all types of platforms, give us a thumbs up. Let us know. Yep, the Band-Aid's back on. Got to put some Neosporin on there. Paul's got those soft hands these days. He doesn't do any hard work anymore. But I'm reminded of that all the time. And so, yeah, we're made it to the weekend. All right, so today, though, to let you know, before we go, some shout-outs to everybody. And again, do me a favor, shout out in the comments. Let me know. Now, the only ones that won't shout out that I can't see are over on Instagram. But you folks over on Instagram, I see you. I see you. I appreciate you. I do see the comments and things, and I will address anything that you ask there. I can see them. I got 6 feet of screen here, if you've never seen my office. So I've got a lot of stuff going on. So I'm monitoring all kinds of stuff through the day. So I'm not a day trader, though. I'm not a stock market guy. I'd rather put my money in a 4% high yield savings account than I am playing in the market. I know I could get 10% return, but I also could lose it all too. So I ain't doing all that. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Let me know where you're at, where you're from today. So, all right. So what we've done yesterday, if you watched the replay last night at 5 Eastern time, everything's Eastern time. Okay. Used to be Central, but everything's Eastern time because we're now back in Virginia. If you watched yesterday, we talked about part 1. We looked at some definitions, most certainly not all of the definitions. Okay, we didn't look at everything. So it's one of those things where you need to, if you're doing work with pools, spas, hot tubs, hydro massage bathtubs, you're going to be working with electrically powered, not battery powered, not solar powered, but electrically powered pool lifts and all that kind of other good stuff, or not mechanical manual pool lifts, the crankers. Anything that involves electrical around pools, you definitely want to go back and watch part 1, simply because we talk about the basic principles and how it flows. So part 1 applies very generally. And so, again, that's important. But today we're going to be looking at, and we also talked about things like the maintenance disconnect that's required for pools, spas, hot tubs, things like that. That's for maintenance disconnect. And all those type of good stuff. Corrosive environment, different wiring methods that were allowed, and also the wiring methods that are allowed within 5 foot of the pool. Used to not be anything allowed other than what's going to be able to supply some equipment that may be directly related to the pool. But now you can run, there's a list of different wiring methods you can run within 5 feet of the perimeter of the pool. Okay. So there, the depth requirement, depth of cover, we covered, that is still using 300.5. Even in that 5 foot zone where it used to be, the wiring methods that were allowed had a separate depth requirement in there and all kinds of other things. So code has changed. So depends on which cycle you're on. Code is changing. Another great example is that for storable pools in the 2023, the depth requirements of 42 inches is gone. So the manufacturer will dictate what a storable pool is or not, based on whether or not how easy it is to take down or not. And of course, the AHJ is going to have to make some decisions as well, because as we're going to see today, we're getting into part 2, and we're talking about permanently installed pools. Those are pools that are going to be installed, and they're permanent in those type of scenarios. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and we'll see how far we get along in today and whether or not we have to continue this journey on Monday. I don't mind. I love doing multi-part series because, again, it allows us to break them down into various days and cover topics, and I get to answer your questions. So that's important for me to make sure we're answering your questions. So we did add some questions. Somebody asked me, sent me something, and I don't know what it was. Hold on. Let me do this real quick because, hold on. I want to show this real quick. Bear with me for a second. Let me see if I can get this up real quick. I just remembered, and I promised somebody I would do this. Let's see here. Bear with me real quick. Let's see, view in HTML. Let's see if it will let me do this. I don't know if it'll let me share this one. I'm hoping it will. So bear with me. I said I'd answer this question for somebody. So I'm going to see if this works. This may not work, may not work. So I had a question that somebody asked me on social media. I think it was Manny might have asked and says, Paul, why is there paper in non-metallic sheath cable? Why is there paper around all of the conductors? And why is there paper, might have asked or not, or somebody's asked on social media before, they said, why do y'all put paper around the bare equipment grounding conductor? Okay, so I wanted to show you the elements of why we do that type of thing, because nothing prohibits us from doing something like a UF-B, which is an extruded separation. So we're not required to use paper. It's just what most of us manufacturers do. It serves a couple things. One, the UL standard requires that we have some type of separation, whether it's UF that you're familiar with, where the separation between the equipment ground and the circuit conductors is material like PVC or some type of material, like in a UF, underground feeder and branch cable. But where we use the non-metallic sheath cable, we typically use paper as the separator to separate and meet the requirement in UL 719. Now, the other reason that we do paper around the entire assembly is because when you're extruding these conductors through the extruder, you have the 3 conductors that run, and you have your equipment ground, and they run kind of just bouncing around, and they run through the extrusion, which is basically a mechanism that squeezes the sheathing material over top of these conductors. If you didn't have paper, what happens is it has it, and if you're not going to inject everything like we do with UF, where you just has a big massive amount of PVC material, with the non-metallic sheath cable, it's just an outer 30 mils of sheathing, right? And so if you don't have some type of paper around the whole perimeter, then what happens is that hot PVC will sink down into the interstices, which is the valleys between the conductors. And in doing that, it would make it hard to strip, that type of thing. Also, we're required to maintain a certain thickness of this sheathing, 30 mils. So what happens if it drops down in there, it could cause areas in the cable where you don't have the 30 mils of maintained thickness, right? So I'm going to see if this works. I don't know that this will because it's a totally separate screen. Let's see if I can share this instead. Actually, it is working. So this is UL 719. And so if we look at construction, right? And you'll see right here, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. There might be a little smaller for you to read, but a little bigger. Let's move it in a little bit. There we go. That's fine. Let's see. Yeah, it's close enough. Y'all can see this. All right. So if you go down and you look, here's the conductors, and here people ask me all the time. And if you want in future episodes, you want me to answer questions about, yeah, it is paper. It's flame retardant or fire retardant type of paper, kind of jute that we use. Okay. So anyway, if you look down here, this is all the requirements and all this kind of stuff. And I'm more than happy to go over these type of things where you want. Here's the insulation. People say, what kind of insulation is in non-metallic sheath cable? Here you see that it's equivalent to THHN, okay? but we don't have to mark anything on those conductors. It's also could be equivalent to TW, okay, that type of thing. So we have different options for as a manufacturer, okay. Let's see here. Let me go down. Let's see here. There's our sheathing. So here's our assembly, right? There you go. There's our assembly. 2 to 3 conductors and yada, yada, yada. That's our assembly. Here's the flat NM cable assembly, right? And here's our thermoplastic jacket with a minimum of 30 mils. Okay, y'all saw that. I just mentioned that a minute ago. So that's the sheathing around it. Okay. Let's go down a little bit further. Let's see here. We're talking about, let's see here. I can't remember exactly where it was. Okay, here's the grounding conductor. Okay, so this is the grounding conductor. You know, funny thing about the UL standards is, you know, you would think that they say grounding conductor. You would think they would just call it the equipment ground. This is not the grounded conductor, by the way. This is the grounding. This is the equipment ground. Now, here's what it says. I'm going to read it to you. It says the grounding conductor shall be entirely in one location in the cable. That is, it shall not be divided into 2 or more parts located separately or distributed helically. That's why it's made like it's made, right? You have that one equipment ground that's in there, okay? Now, we won't look at NMC because nobody makes that anymore. It's basically you use UF-B, okay? That type of thing. So it says in either the 2 or 3 conductor flat version, which a lot of us make today instead of the plexed version, for the 3 or more, it says type NM cable. It says the grounding conductor shall be placed in the valley between 2 of the circuit conductors or directly between 2 of the circuit conductors. Now, if it's a twisted assembly with 2 circuit conductors and the grounding conductor shall be cabled or basically plexed or twisted with the circuit conductors. In a twisted assembly with 3 or 4 circuit conductors, that'd be like a 12-3, 14-3, things like that. It says the grounding conductor shall be cabled with the circuit conductors, okay, so plexed with it, or shall be placed in the center section of the assembly. We usually will just plex it with, if you're going to do a plexed NM cable, okay? Now, in untwisted assemblies of 3 or 4, 10 conductors only, the grounding conductor shall be bundled along with the circuit conductors in no particular location, okay? Now, in all constructions in which bare grounding conductor is used, this conductor shall be kept by a wrap or other means from coming into contact with any nylon jacket on the circuit on a circuit conductor, okay, or with circuit conductor insulation. So manufacturers choose to do this, folks, okay? Manufacturers choose to do this let me get back to me real quick, okay? Manufacturers choose to do this by using the paper, and that's what they put around the equipment grounding conductor. But again, UF cable is a little different. That would be an example. That doesn't typically fall under 719 anyway. That's 493, but same concept. There was some other material in there. It is part of the construction, but in 719, we have to use a wrap or some other means to do that. So the manufacturers were experimenting with a paperless version of non-metallic sheath cable. The reason you don't see a paperless version of it, because most people are just going to use UF, and the National Electrical Code allows UF to be used in locations where NM can be used. So what's the point? We tried to make it and try to remove the paper, but the problem is it made kind of a textured NM. And it also, because of how it was made, it made it more rigid and harder to strip. So by maintaining that 30 mils and by putting that paper in there, not just around the equipment ground, but around the assembly, it makes it easier to separate, right? That type of thing as well. And it allows it to hold its nice form, so it's easier to glide the knife through or your stripping device through. Does that make sense? But it's everything. It's amazing that things are And I'm here to answer those questions if you have those type of questions, because people do. And there is science, there is reasoning behind all of this stuff that we do, right? So again, a lot of people have those questions, okay? One of the questions, Adam says, quick question, why did they go to coloring NM wire, or you mean the cable? Why did they go to coloring it? Well, first of all, just so everybody knows, and again, you bring your questions. Again, this is Friday. I'll answer questions. We will get into the swimming pool stuff, and if it just goes into next week, that's fine. I don't care. People say, Paul, get to the point. I don't care. I do whatever I want. My show. And so I love answering questions. Oh, by the way, you see scrolling across the bottom. If you're somebody who hasn't jumped in yet and got our 2023 exam prep, if you do it today until the end of this month at midnight, which is, I guess, tomorrow at midnight, if you purchase the 2023 in hand, no, don't ask me if you purchased it in the past. Can I get it now? Because no, you can't. That's just how sales work, okay? So don't even ask. Sorry. This is a special, and it's only till the end of this month. From now to the end of the month, if you purchase the 2023 Exam Prep Enhanced, you will also get the 2023 Grounding and Bonding course as a bonus. That's $299 bonus. That's my giveaway for this month to the end of the month. Now, one of the things you'll notice is we're going to be doing some specials and running them across the bottom for moving forward, different days that we may have specials or monthly specials or something like that. We'll put them in a ticker across the bottom. If you don't see a ticker, then we ain't got a special going. Okay, that makes sense. So if you're on the fence, this is the time, because neither one of them expire. 2023 exam prep could be used even after exam prep, and you also are going to get the grounding and bonding as well. And again, nope, it doesn't apply to anybody that's already purchased. Sorry. Only applies to new purchases from today until tomorrow at midnight. Suck it up! It is the way it works. When you go to Walmart and you get a special, they don't go, well, we'll give you the special. If it's over, it's over. If it's special, it's only during this time frame. Yeah, I get it. All right, so anyway, hope that answers your question. All right, let's see here. Let's see, what do we got here? Hey, Paul, good morning. Let me talk about the colors. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I forgot to address the colors. I got rambling on to something else. All right, Adams, let me address your color question thing. So the color coding that took place on non-metallic sheath cable, the white, which was traditional, started that way with all sizes, just a white extrusion, white virgin pellet, just a white, was commonplace. And then years ago, a guy named Mr. Rigo, Vince Rigo, who was the CEO, he used to own Capital Wire and Cable, which ultimately he sold. And then he created a company called Encore Wire. Now, the name Encore came because he had owned companies multiple times, wire and cable companies. He was an innovator in our industry. And he sold it and then waited for them to fail. Then he would buy it back at a bargain price and he would sell it, right? That type of thing. And then he would come back and he would sell it and he would buy it back again. Very smart dude. So he created Encore Wire. And then one day, somebody asked him and said, can you colorize the sheathing? And so they threw in some color pellets and they got colors out of it. And so it's not a requirement anywhere. It's just something that he did and the industry caught on. He didn't patent it. He didn't try to patent it. And so they came out with the colors. One of the big reasons that this even came up, it was to make it a little easier for the ability to, it made it a little easier for inspectors, for example, to identify certain things like yellow with the 12, that type of thing. Okay. Mitch, the reason for that is to try to speed you up and make you get more proficient. That's why the timer's on it that way. Okay. It's done that way to kind of subliminally push you to do that. Okay. That's why it's done that way. You can take them over and over again. You could take it over again, but that's the way it's done. Right. It's order to try to force you to a certain time speed. It would be unrealistic under normal situations to try to get you to push, 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 push. That's why it's done that way. So anyway, so they came out with the colors. They came out with the white, the yellow, the orange. Okay. And again, it was good for inspectors to be able to, at a glance, you see in the kitchen, you see the yellow, then you know, okay, there's a 20 amp circuit. Still have to do your due diligence, right? You still have to look at it and make sure that it's the minimum of 2 small appliance branch circuits, but at least you could see it, right? And that's how it started. And when you see the orange, you know it's 30 amps, that type of thing. So it's not in the code anywhere. It's not mandated. It's not required. It's not that type of thing. It's not. But it was started by a man named Mr. Rigo, and he was the founder of Encore Wire Corporation. He also, by the way, founded the colored conductors because it took the same concept and applied it to insulated conductors. So if you ever wonder where your colored conductors, which makes phasing and circuit identification easier. If you wonder where that came from, that also came from Mr. Rigo. Because before that, it was just black and you would wrap it in tape or put numbers on it or do something like that to identify it. So he also did that. He said, look, if it works for this, it'll work for that. So he was the first to come up with all that type of stuff. Didn't patent any of it, didn't try to, didn't care about that kind of stuff. Just wanted to make the industry better. And he was a pioneer in the wiring cable industry. And so he's the one that started Encore Wire Corporation. Very highly respected individual. But that's the color code. Now, the new colors that you see, pinks and purples and all that, nothing has ever prohibited manufacturers from making a pink sheathing because Encore did it for breast cancer awareness. We made a bunch of wire in Dallas that was blue for the Dallas Mavericks and their type of application, kind of a promotion. So nothing requires it. Even today, if you have some NM that still has the white sheathing and it's 12 gauge in it, that's okay. It's not a violation because the color coding of the sheathing isn't a code rule. It's just up to the manufacturer. Now, have they all standardized? Yes, we all have standardized and we all pretty much follow the same thing. What's up? What's up, Red Dog? I see you in there.
Whoa. Big dog.
So we all follow the same concept, right? But it's not a code requirement, okay? Just want to make sure that's what we have here. Also, I think that I've probably screwed up something here. Let me go back. Yes, I have screwed up something here. Bear with me. There we go. There we go. I thought I made sure I was worried that I had screwed up something, and I did screw up something by sharing that UL thing with you. Okay. All right. So hope that answers all your questions on that and the color coding. So the color coding today, the pinks for the 3-wire and all that stuff, it's just to hopefully help you learn and identify the use. That's all. And so you know what it is by a glance. That's it. Okay. No inspector should ever, fail somebody because of the sheathing color. That should not be something that's ever an issue with anything. Okay. Real quick, let's do our shout outs as always. Before I get started, I want to make sure I do give our shout outs. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, guys. So what's up, Frank? Thanks for joining us this morning. Paul, glad to have you in the house as always. Glad to have you here. Let's see here. Who else we got? Jonathan, welcome. Glad to have you here, Jonathan, in the house. Tom is in the house grading your work today, Tom. Sorry for the delay. What's up, Adam? Thanks for joining us. Let's see here. Who else do we got here? Peter's in the house. Good morning, Peter. Happy Friday, Peter. Glad to have you here. What's up, Douglas? Glad to have you in the house, Douglas. Thanks for joining us today. Santana, I see you. #win. Thanks for joining us this morning. Adam says it's 5 a.m. Let the fun begin. What's up, Angel? Glad to have you here. Manny's in the house. Manny, hopefully I answered your question. Happy Friday to you, my friend. Good morning, Angel. Glad to have you here as well. Rob's in the house. Good morning. That's about it. That's all you're going to get. What's up? Swartzy's in the house. What's up, Swartz? In the house. Still waiting for Swartz to get into the CMECP program. Okay. Duly worthy. Duly worthy. But haven't seen him initiate that yet. What's up, David? Glad to have you here as always, my friend. We'll address your equipotential bonding. Obviously, 48-inch pool depth is probably not storable or portable or anything. So it's 48 inches, there you go. Do we have some little nuances in the code we got to look at too? But I consider that permanent. I ain't pulling that apart. What's up, Charlie? What's up? Glad to have you here. Robert's in the house from San Antonio. Glad to have you here, Robert. Good morning, Rob. On multiple platforms, gaming the system. What's up, Skyattle? Thank you for joining us. Glad to have you here. What's up, High Voltage Hands in the house? Andrew from Georgia. Welcome, Andrew. Glad to have you here. Mr. Negative One. Gonna positive vibes today, though. Positive vibes today. What's up, Negative One? Glad to have you here. Leroy's in the house. Glad to have you here. Thank you, Leroy. What's up, Haas? Haas from right down in Richmond. I remember. Let's see here. What's up, Edgar? Glad to have you here, my friend. We're rolling through here. What do we got? Tony. Welcome, Tony. Glad to have you here. What's up, Joseph? Our brother from up in New Jersey. Glad to have you here as well. Let's see here. Let's see. Like that hat. You like this hat? You got to earn this hat. What does CMECP mean? Dude, where have you been? CMECP, Certified Master Electrical Code Professional. If you've got the skills to earn your token, whoop, whoop, whoop. David's got one of these. Whoop, whoop, whoop. You got the skills to earn it. You got to prove it. And you got to pass. Ask Tom. He just did his proctored exam. Was it yesterday or day before yesterday? I don't remember. But he just did his day before yesterday. He did it, and we got to get grading done today. I'm sorry. Tom, I'm a slacker. I am a slacker. Says you bought an 87 and 90. Why the hell would you buy those? Okay, $5. Okay, code changes in front of the book. There you go. Why are you buying that old stuff? New stuff. Don't buy that old stuff. What's up, Marlon? Thanks for joining us. Mike, we know that's Alex. Good morning. Glad to have you here. Let's see, where are we at? Nepo's in the house. Nepo, welcome. Glad to have you here. We're going to have to cover some pool stuff quickly, guys. Quick question. We already answered that one. What's up, Ryan? Glad to have you here. What's up, Craig? Glad to have you in the house. What's up, Anselmo? Glad to have you here in the house. Let's see here. All right, we addressed your question, Mitch. Hey, good morning. I have a question regarding the final practice exams in the 2020 program. Notice they were 100 questions and 1 hour. We want to force you to speed. Let's see here. Paul, don't get to the point. Red Dog's in the house. We hollered at you.
Woo, 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 woo. Big dog.
Let's see here. What do we got? Greg is in the house. Happy Friday. Hey. You're most welcome, Manny. Glad we could answer that for you. No breakdancing today. I might blow a hip or something like that. Let's see. Michael says very soon. He's in the middle of a healthcare facility renovation. Dude, you got to be able to budget your time, bro. You should be able, ask Tom, you should be able to do the CMECP, work in the daily job, have a life. You got to do it all to be a CMECP, brother. Come on. Stop making excuses, slacker. All right. What's up, Uncle Lulu? What is up? From Austin, Texas, down way. There you go. David, there you go. Certified Master Electrical Code Professional. What's up, Val? Good morning. Okay. And let's see here. What do we got? Just asked the same question to the hog. Came up with the same answer. Sweet. What question was that again? Did I forget? I forget what question you asked. Did you ask the hog if I was awesome? And it said yes. Then hey. That's what I'm talking about. Because if you read on social media, Paul is all about himself. I'm just saying. That's what they say. All right. Okay, let's go on and get into the code. Come on, let's do it. All right. So we're now moving into part 2 of 680s. We're talking about, and if you did not get in on the banner and you're not interested in the 2023 NEZ exam prep program and get the free 2023 grounding and bonding with purchases from today until the end of the month, then you're going to be crap out of luck because I am turning that notice off right now. And for those that come in late, you're going to miss it. So sorry, bye-bye special. Okay, is gone. All right, so now permanently installed pools, part 2. We find the rules governing permanently installed pools, such as for motors, we have clearance, overhead lighting, underwater lighting, existing installations, receptacles, requirements for switches, switching, equipment associated with the pool. We have our bonding and grounding requirements. We have our equipotential bonding rules that come up, and all those kind of stuff. What's up, John? Glad to have you here. AJ, I see you in the house. So we have all those things that are coming up. All right. So bonding or connecting together all metal parts in and around the pool. Ensure that these metal parts are at or near the same voltage potential to ground, greatly reducing electric shock. Okay. So part 1, we went over that voltage gradients. And again, one of those things where you have to lower the resistance, the higher the current. Okay, those type of things. What does the hog say? Says I'm an expert. Well, now we know we can't trust the hog now, because you know what? That's not true. All you gotta do is again go to social media and ask some of the young folks that have never heard of me. They say, "Who the hell is that Abernathy? He ain't worth a damn." Okay. Anyway, they want to go watch somebody on YouTube that maybe has a couple years of it and has a course with repetitive questions. And ultimately, everybody calls me and says, Paul, can I get your program? Because that program's not teaching me anything. It's all repetitive. I'm just saying, I'm just passing the word what people tell me. Just saying, there's a system, there's a structure. We've mastered it. I'm just saying. That's why it's called Master the NEC. I'm just saying. All right. Ooh, I'm jacked today. Must have had a bunch of coffee or something. All right, look. Stray voltages and voltage gradient problems are kept to a minimum by keeping everything at the same potential. Installing a properly sized equipment grounding conductor provides a ground fault return path, which facilitates the opening of the overcurrent protected device should a fault occur in the circuit. So let's not confuse equipotential bonding, tying everything together so everything's at the same potential. Let's never confuse that with the requirements for equipment grounding conductors, okay, which is to facilitate the operation of an overcurrent protected device and serves equipment bonding functions that just happen to be germane to how you install the system to create this low impedance effective ground fault current path. That's a mouthful. That's a mouthful. You need my grounding and bonding course to understand all that kind of stuff. All right. All right. So now let's go on. Let's talk about it. And we'll go to the code and look at it. So real quick, we go pop into the NEC right here. So we're starting this journey right here, 680.20, general. It says electrical installations at permanently installed pools. We have a definition for this, okay? What's up, Adrian? Thanks for joining us. So permanently installed pool, not storable pools, not inflatable pools, permanently installed pools. We have a definition of permanently installed pools. And then now it is over in Article 100 if you're in the 2023. By the way, if you're in a code and you're like 2020, 2017, I am always going to be using the latest edition, okay? So it may not be exactly what's in your code book because I cannot keep going backwards. I have to move forwards in these shows. So we're always going to use the latest edition. So it's up to you to do your due diligence to see, well, what is Paul talking about and how did it change from my 2020? And so you actually will learn in the process if you're smart. You'll listen to the 2023, and then if you're in the 2020, you'll go, well, mine says this or that. Oh, I'm learning how it's going to change or how it's evolving. It's a good thing, okay? All right. So electrical installations in permanently installed pools shall comply with the provisions of Part 1. We talked about that yesterday and how the structure works. So all those permanent pools got to meet all that stuff in Part 1. You know, the maintenance disconnects, all that kind of, got to meet all of that. but it also has to meet all of what we're getting ready to talk about in part 2. All right. So we get down here. First one, 680.21 is motors. Okay. So the wiring to a pool motor shall comply with 680.21A1 or. Notice this or. This is a great time to explain the power of and or. When you see and in the code book, it says you have to do this and you have to do that. If you see or, it says you do this or you do that, depending on which one's applicable to your situation. So the and and the or. So just remember, you see one code reference and it says and this, then you're forced to comply with both when it's a shall requirement, right? Now, if it says this or that, then you may have a situation where you comply with this one or this one, which one's applicable to your installation, okay? Either or. Now, these are shall requirements right here, right? Okay, so it says shall, so that is a mandatory rule, that type of thing, okay? Now, you have some permissive rules within each one of these, 1 and 2, but that's the general rule. You have to comply with one of the two if you're doing it for a pool pump motor. The first one is flexible connections. It says where necessary to employ flexible connections at or adjacent being next to, by the way, adjacent to the motors. It says liquid tight flexible metal, liquid tight flexible non-metallic conduit, or MC cable suitable for the use shall be permitted. Now, when somebody says suitable for the use, you're saying, well, does that mean that it has to be marked as suitable for the motor? That's a big misconception because manufacturers, I showed you this yesterday, it is optional in order to put on there suitable for use with pool pump motors, but it's not a mandatory requirement. So when something says suitable for the use, then we understand that UL 1569 doesn't mandate it. So it is suitable for the use because it is flexible. It is PVC jacketed, so it is equivalent to like a liquid tight that has that extruded covering over it or just a pure extruded non-metallic conduit. So when it says suitable for the use, you can use just normal PVC jacketed MC because that would be what is suitable for the use in the same equivalent environment. Does that make sense? That type of thing, okay? Now it says, and then number 2, let's go back. Let's see here. Now the other application that people ask, they go, well, can I use if the motor is inside, let's say a pump room, right? And in that scenario, then you pick up into the wiring and that's where you're going to have, because of the potential for corrosive environment, that's where you're going to end up by default being associated with a PVC jacketed MC anyway, that type of thing. And it is suitable for the use. It is suitable for flexible connection. It's what it's there for. And so again, would I like this wording to be a little different? Because many people, they think the word suitable for the use means that it has to have that non-required marking on the side of the MC cable. And I would say it does not. Okay, that type of thing. Okay. And if it says it shall be labeled or something like that, or marked, that type of thing, then that's different. So optional in UL 1569. But do a lot of manufacturers do that? Yeah, they may, but we don't because we make a lot of PVC jacketed MC. We're not going to make something special just to put that marking on it, just to have it sit on a shelf. That's not how we make products. What's up, Miles? Glad to have you here. Okay. All right, so that's your flexible there. And then, of course, you got the cord and plug right here. It says there are occasions where pool motors will have cord and plug connections. It is permissible to utilize this method of connection as long as the flexible cord is not more than 3 feet in overall length. And it says that right in the National Electrical Code 680.21A2. So, these are permanent pulls. We're talking permanent. Don't ask me questions about storable. We're not in storable. We're in permanent right now. Okay, so wiring to the motor, it can be cord and plug connected as long as it's not more than 3 feet. Okay, I know that, I know somebody's out there typing right now asking about cords for storable pools. I already know it. I can feel who is probably thinking that. Okay, I can tell you, I feel it. That's not what we're talking about. Okay, all right. As we begin to examine many changes that are associated with ground fault circuit interrupters, it is important to take inventory of the use of the word outlets rather than receptacle when stating when GFCI protection is required. The word outlet is a defined term in Article 100. And what does outlet mean? It means a point on the wiring system at which current is taken to supply utilization equipment. A receptacle is not utilization equipment. A receptacle is a device. The definition of utilization equipment is equipment that's going to consume energy in a certain way. So we have a defined term of utilization equipment. Okay, a receptacle is a device. But when we say outlet, we want to make sure that you're not using slang and think we're talking about a receptacle, because a receptacle is not an outlet. Now, the point that you install it into a box where your circuit runs to, and you're taking it from the branch circuit via a receptacle outlet device, that is the outlet point. Okay, it's that summation of where you're taking the power from. The receptacle itself is just a device. Okay, and somebody tried to submit this, another educator tried to submit some crazy thoughts of changing the word outlet and all this kind of stuff, and it failed miserably because, again, it just goes to show you that even us experts, quote unquote, the trade hog experts, they can get it wrong, and it's okay because sometimes it just happens. We're so busy at looking at stuff, then we can't see the forest for the trees, that type of thing, and eventually we come around and that type of thing, but. He was really trying to spread something that was really improper. There's a reason we need outlet defined this way, because there is so many applications where we're taking power from the system to supply specific utilization equipment, and we need to understand where the outlet is, not a device, that type of thing. Make sense? Okay. Now, just one reason we want to cover that here is because you're going to see us talk about a lot of things about GFCI. And when we say like hardwired versus a receptacle in 210.8a is about receptacles. But then you have other applications like in 210.8d, which are talking about other things that are GFCI protect. That's not outlet. I mean, that's not receptacle driven. That is hardwired application. It could be cord and plug connected to a receptacle, but it's about the circuit and it's about protecting the circuit. And in many cases, you have to do that with a GFCI breaker. You couldn't do that with a receptacle, that type of thing, okay? So it's so important to understand the concepts when it comes to GFCI, okay? It says, as a result, and I know this is probably hard to see, that's why I'm reading it to you. As a result of the definition, GFCI protection is required for pool pump motors, regardless. So remember this. When it comes to pool pump motors, regardless of whether the motor is connected by a cord and plug, okay, or for a receptacle, a cord and plug from a receptacle outlet, or whether the motor is connected with hardwire, such as liquid-tight flexible metal or liquid-tight flexible non-metallic conduit directly to a utilization equipment or right to the motor. Regardless of that, okay? That's why it's so important to understand when it says outlet, is that in those scenarios with the motor, it doesn't matter whether you're going to use the cord and plug option or you're going to be hardwiring it to a junction box. Either way, GFCI is required for pool pump motors. Okay. Now, it says it also notes that the GFCI protection is required for branch circuits that are rated 150 volts to ground. Okay. These electrical systems that operate at a voltage of 120/240, single phase 3-wire, and 208Y120 three-phase full wire Y systems. Okay, that's why you see the Y right here, right? This rule also applies if the overcurrent protection is 60 amperes or less. Okay, so those rules are required to have that GFCI protection for these motors. Okay, now where can we see that? Let's just go look at the code because I like looking at the code. All right, right here. So we're under motors still, right? Right here, still under motors, right? So we just drop down. Again, you do have double insulated pumps, that type of thing. These cords where they have double insulation, that type of thing. Okay. All right. So again, you still have some pumps, and on that scenario right there, all incorporated into the double insulated pump. All right. Now, ground fault protection. Okay. So general outlets. Notice that's important while we determined outlets. Okay. It's because I don't want anybody to think, oh, outlet, that's only a cord and plug connection. No, get that out of your mind. We're going to get that out, okay? So outlets serving pool motors shall have ground fault protection complying with 680.5B or 685.5C as applicable, okay? All right. So there you go. So there you go. So that's requirements. So and so we can go back and look at 685. I can pop it up. All right, so here's the one we just talked about. So this is 680.5B, 150 volts or less to ground. And this is going to be requiring it to have a Class A GFCI. That is the 4 to 6 milliamp thresholds. Okay, so there you go. There's your requirement there. And you do have an exception. We'll talk about that when we get a little bit more towards receptacle applications and things like that. But that's your GFCI requirement for that. And then, of course, the C is above 150 volts to ground, okay? And there you go. And those typically provide the ones that we call SPGFCI, okay? Special purpose ground fault circuit interrupter. So you have your normal, and then you have your special purpose ground fault circuit interrupters, okay? And this is typically for those that are over or above 150 volts to ground. You'll use a special purpose ground fault circuit interrupter, okay? All right, back to our lesson here, okay? Let's see here. Tennessee still on 2017, yep. In some parts of jurisdictions might have jumped to 2020 because Tennessee is weird. Tennessee as a whole, there's this little jurisdictions that move ahead, and then there's the other parts of the state that stay behind. So again, it pays to understand your state because they do some weird things, okay? Miles says, seriously, if you're on the fence, give yourself the best chance to succeed. I wouldn't be passing my master's in PA in West Virginia on the first attempt if it wasn't for the Fast Tracks program. That's what I'm talking about. Right there. Again, I don't know anybody else's. I got at least 5 calls this week from people that were on video only programs, and they literally called me up and said, you know, I felt like it was repetitious and I really wasn't learning anything, and the guy was just repetitious. And again, that's because anybody can start teaching code. It doesn't make you special. It's structure. The way our program works is you read it, you go to the chevrons, you go to the code book, you come back into the material, you use the videos for enhanced knowledge, you come back. There's a structure to it. I didn't make this stuff up. You know, I've been doing this stuff for nearly 40 years. I have taught thousands and thousands and thousands of people to learn the NEC. That's not a pat on the back. Look, anybody that knows me, I just got to tell you how it is. There's a reason that we have success. Now, do some people still struggle? Sure, because code is hard, right? It's hard, okay? Now, the NASCLA exam, they have their own guide, their own stuff, and it has other things that incorporate into it. Code is code, so you shouldn't have any problem with that. But again, there are books out there on the NASCLA. I'm not interested in doing anything with that program because it's not accepted, but in only a few states. It's not all over the country. So it's not on my radar to be involved in it yet. But some people like it because it does allow some reciprocity where it does accept it, but it's still not that many. So I don't focus on it, but there are books out there that you can get. But again, the code part, if you're in our program, the NEC, you have to look at what other things that it may add. Like is it adding things that may be on the NASCLA exam that are something that's proprietary to their study method, that's not NEC based, that type of thing. Because if it's an NEC based exam, it's purely on the National Electrical Code, I don't know of any program better than ours. But I am not overly familiar with the NASCLA in it. It hasn't really come across our radar to get that involved with it yet. Again, we deal with things that are going to make our company money. We're a business. I am not just, I mean, people think this all the time when I charge for my courses and they go, well, other people are doing it for free on the internet. Okay. Okay. But I'm in business. And so far, the NASCLA thing is not enough that it's worth us being involved in it. Because it's not going to, that's why we get rid of courses. If the courses aren't yielding enough interest, we don't keep them. That's why we got rid of our residential and commercial. The students that are in them right now can continue the program, but there wasn't enough interest in it. Probably because we don't market very well. We're not on all the search engines. We're only word of mouth. I don't pay for advertising. So while they were great programs, it wasn't enough to justify my time. And I do have some internal thresholds that we have here that if something doesn't hit a certain milestone by a certain point or whatever, then we just drop it, right? Yep. Yeah, Jonathan, that is exactly what I got at least 5 times this week when I had people call me up and ask for my program. That is exactly what they said. Okay, at least 5 this week so far that called me, that type of thing. And again, anybody can walk on the shoulders of people that have been doing it for 40 years. I mean, it's not brain surgery to teach you how to do box fill, raceway, pull box. And then other people say that certain people get to the point quicker. Well, that's just my style. So that means that my style is not for everybody because I do talk and ramble and go down stories like old Mark Odie used to do. And some people don't like that. Some people want straight to the point, and that's fine too. It's just not my style. So I tell people, if that's what you want, if you don't like the way I teach or the way our program is, then buy somebody else's. There's other options out there. Okay. So I tell them, I say, use them. I mean, I'm not here to say that other educators aren't great. They are. Mike's great. Other time, that guy might be okay. At the end of the day, you have to look at everything that you get, right? So for us, you get the course, you get the process, you get the structure. If you get the enhanced, you can get videos. If you want to ask questions, you can ask me. You can come to the coffee hour. If you want to use the Fast Tracks Interact and ask questions in the program, you can do that. So we have so many ways that people can, that type of thing, right? Okay. I wish, I wish we could get more people that would, more people using our programs in schools and programs and training and all. I wish we could. But again, we're not, I had somebody on one of the social media say, who is Paul Abernathy? So again, there's a lot of people that after 40 years, the younger generation, because of social media, they've not heard of somebody like me who's been teaching forever. The ones that actually cut our teeth teaching the code. You hear all these influencers, and the influencers, they get 100, 200, 300, 400,000 followers, and then people think that they're God or gospel. That is not true. Influencers are just people that follow. That doesn't mean they know the code. Okay, it's very easy to make a 5-minute, 10-minute video and edit it. None of my stuff you see on my channels is edited. I don't edit. I turn the camera on and I spew it. I do not edit video. I do not piece together videos. I just don't. I don't have the time. If it's going to come out of this orifice, then it is what I teach. I just don't have the time to do that. Okay. So it may not make it pretty videos, may not make this nice flashy videos. Okay. Electrician U does some great pretty videos. But I am what you get. And some people like that and some people don't. And it's okay. I don't care. I'm here to teach what I can teach. When I'm gone, I'm gone. hopefully you learned something. All right, where was I at? I'm sorry. Frank says, I have a question. Does fire alarm EMT raceway need to be colored red? Specs do not require it. I looked at Article 760. This will be very spec driven. So again, we're kind of deviating away from the NEC when it comes to the application of what was I talking about? We were deviating away from the application of part 2 for 680. So I get it. So you have to forgive me because I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. So I am rambling into other topics. It is what it is. That's why you come to the show. Okay. So if we go and look at 760 and let's go down here let's look at circuit identification. Let's kind of look here. So again, I'm in 2023. Okay. So here's let's see, abandoned, integrity, general, okay, yada, yada. Let's see here, hazardous classified, cables, identification, temperature, communication raceways. Okay, let's see, I don't do a whole lot with that, so I have to look at it as well, like you. And I am into 2023. So let's go back here. Okay. So here's the fire alarm, covers the wiring and equipment for fire alarm systems. Okay. All right, so we'll see. So this is where we use bold scan real quick, right? So we'll look in here, we're gonna see, okay, spacing, corrosive environment, yada, 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 building control, yada, yada, optical, yada, 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 installation, yada, yada, yada. Raceway is different, okay, it says sleeves, whatever, nothing in there. Installation of raceway, the number and size of the cable and connector shall comply with 300.7. Okay, that's complete systems. Bushings, yada, yada, yada. Cable routing assemblies. Communication, no. Temperature limitations, power limiting, no. Identification of equipment ground, okay. Again, just got to follow the rules in 250.119. If it is insulated, it's got to be green or green with the yellow stripe. Hazardous locations, it is follow the rules in hazardous location. Accessible behind panels, mechanical execution of work. Let's see here. Neat and workmanlike manner, basically pulling all of the stuff that was in the general requirements for neat and workmanlike manner, putting it up here, okay? All right, okay. Integrity, yada, yada, yada. Abandoned cables and fire alarm circuit identification. So fire alarm circuits shall be identified at terminals and junction locations in a manner that helps to prevent unintentional signals on fire alarm system circuits during testing and servicing of the system. So that is at terminals, the identification and marking to make it clear that it's a fire alarm circuit, and at junction locations. Okay, that has nothing to do with that. Extending beyond the building. Okay, nothing about that. Over voltage, no. Requirement, fire alarm circuit shall. Okay, so we have these requirements here. Okay, there you go, there you go. All right, so then you're getting to non-power limited. So that's your typical 600 volt type of application, right? And so there's that. So that if you're doing that, that's for like going out to NAC panels and signalers that need to have like 120 volts to it, right? That's a non-power limited application, right? It also reminds you that the power source is non-limited. It shall comply with chapters 1 through 4 of the NEC. So you treat it like a normal wiring method, right? And the voltage can't exceed 600 volts. Okay, so that would be like NACs and audibles and things like that, which need 120 volt type of scenario. Not the ones that are power limited. That typically would be less. Okay, here's the branch circuit. It says the branch circuit supplying a fire alarm equipment shall supply no other loads. Well, that's a no-brainer. It says the location of the branch circuit overcurrent protective device shall be permanently identified at the fire alarm control unit. Yep, so you're going to put the marking at wherever the overcurrent device is. Okay. The circuit disconnecting means shall have red identification, shall be accessible only to qualified persons. Okay, makes sense. Shall be identified as fire alarm circuit, and red identification. The red identification shall not damage the overcurrent protected device. That means you don't paint it on. You put it in a way that's not going to damage the device or obscure any of the information from the manufacturer. That's a no-brainer. It says this circuit shall not be supplied through ground fault circuit interrupters or arc fault circuit interrupters. That's a no-brainer as well. Okay. There's your overcurrent protection. That's not really to your question. This is the circuit overcurrent device requirements. Okay. Not really germane to the question. Okay. So the wiring, it says installation of non-power limited fire alarm circuits shall be in accordance with 110.3b, 300.7. Okay. So this is the environment that it's at. This is that it meets its listing. Okay. This means that it's going to be properly secured and supported above a suspended ceiling. All these kind of yada, yada, yadas. Okay, that's no problem there. Okay, conductors of different circuits in the same cable, enclosure, or raceway. So class 1 with non-power limited fire alarm says class 1 and non-power limited, typically class 1 in the 2023 code are still those that are going to operate just like a 120 volt type circuit, right? Okay. So here it says nothing in there. Okay. Power supply and fire alarm circuits shall be permitted to be in the same cable, enclosure, or raceway only when connected to the same equipment. Okay. Sizing, let's see, circuit conductors, that's really not anything for your question. There you go. It's not really. This shows you it has to be solid or stranded copper. None of that other wacky stuff that we've talked about it before. You know what I'm talking about. Okay. This is a number of conductors. Okay, so this is a number of conductors in it. This is power, yada, yada, yada. Cable trays, multi-conductor cables, yada, yada, yada. All that type of stuff. I'm spending a lot of time in there to give you one answer, but yada, yada, yada. Nothing in there about it. Other wiring, yada, yada, yada. So then we're getting into power limited. Okay, so then in power limited, okay, we're into power limited. So the branch circuit supplying fire alarm equipment shall comply with the following. Okay, let's see. So this is for power limiting. Okay, let's see here. Same kind of stuff. Disconnect. Same general stuff, right? Circuit marking. The equipment supplying. Okay, so that's equipment. Okay, wiring methods. I don't see anything about color coding for there. Wiring material, yada, yada, yada. I don't see nothing about color coding requirement for there. Wiring methods, okay. I don't see anything about that. Oh, typically, by the way, these are typically going to be cables, so wouldn't do that. Let's see here. Okay, wiring methods and material. Let's see. In raceways, exposed on ceilings, sidewalls, thing right here. Let's see. Cable splice and termination should be made in listed fittings boxes. That's a no-brainer. When installing, exposed cables shall be adequately supported. That doesn't help us. Okay. Passing through walls, that's not going to be anything. That's not going to be worth us looking for this conversation. That doesn't matter. Okay. So let's see. So if you look down all these type of things, I don't see anything that would require color to have that raceway. It'd be something now. Now, where does that differ? That differs, for those that are asking, that can differ from where you get into requirements like, and this has really nothing to do with that, but when it gets over here and you start looking at the different things for emergency, that type of thing, okay, then you'll have some other requirements that you have to follow, okay, but that's not the same thing. That is not, your fire alarm is not that, okay. Let's see here. Where we got? Here's some extra stuff. Let's see, where are we at? Integrity. I don't know why I'm venturing down this rabbit hole here. Just trying to look for something else. What was I looking for? There was something I was looking for. Oh, let me go back up to the top. This is why I go down rabbit holes here. Wait a minute, we're not even talking about emergency, but something made me draw my mind over here to emergency. I wanted to show. Testing, no. Temporary, no. What was I thinking of? Tom, help me out. What? Something in my mind was thinking I was going here for something. And I can't remember what it was. I can't remember why I was going here. So I can't remember why I was going here. Probably, so emergency wire assisting the wiring, it says emergency circuits shall be permanently marked so that they are readily identified as a component of the emergency circuit or system by the following means, right? So it says all boxes and enclosure, including all of this, shall be marked. And it says where box enclosures are encountered, exposed cables and raceway systems shall be permanently marked to be identified as a component of the emergency circuit. Okay, and this marking has to be at intervals not exceeding 25 feet. So that doesn't mean the raceway has to be a certain color. This is emergency system, by the way. This is not talking about your fire alarm. I just figured out, my mind was taking me there because that's how my mind works. And so there is a marking requirement for emergency systems in the building that you have to do it every 25 feet, put the marking to let it know that it is an emergency system. Okay, or emergency circuit, that type of thing. And I don't know if there's commentary here. The required marking can be the color code, the wording, the words emergency circuit, or any other method acceptable to the AHJ on boxes and enclosures, that type of thing. Or, and again, if it's on the raceway, then you've had these different boxes, then the exposed cable and raceway systems shall be permanently marked to identify the components, and it's every 25 feet. I know that's not germane to what you were asking, but I go down these rabbit holes. Okay, so anyway, let me try to get back on topic. So nothing for the fire pump requirement. For the fire alarm requirement for that marking, but it is for emergency systems. So I don't know why I went down that rabbit hole for you, but because you didn't even ask me anything about emergency systems, but somebody out there will get something out of that maybe. That's part of your life that you'll never get back, but let me get back to where I was. Okay. All right. So back to the swimming pools. Okay. We're into part 2. Okay. So GFCI devices, again, for protecting against electric shock. They work on they will not trip at 4 milliamps or less, but they are definitely going to trip at 6 milliamps and greater. We call it 5 nominal. Okay. All right. So GFCI protection, 680.21c, it says outlets supplying pool pump motors. And by the way, when you see this in highlighted like this with that little star, that tells you that we pulled that right out of the NEC. So we're talking about motors. And so you have the power usually will run, that type of thing, right? So it says outlets supplying pool pump motors shall have ground fault circuit protection, complying with 680.5b or c as applicable. Receptacles are direct connection, such as from outlets using a hardwire method as described in the opening commentary. A pump motor under the code section requires GFCI protection. Okay. Now, what about replacement? So this was big that was brought into the code, and we'll go over to the NEC and look at the replacement requirement because this is something that was big that was brought in. Is right here. All right, let me get rid of this. So right here. Pool pump replacement. It says where a pool pump motor in 680.21c1, okay, so this is right here, okay, there you go, is replaced or repaired. So that was added into 2023 because it said it only would have applied if it was replaced. And I think this was brought up by, I think it was Ryan Jackson who brought this up during the code meetings. He was like, so somebody could come out and repair it and it didn't have GFCI protection. They came out to service it and they could repair it. I don't know how easy the motor would be to repair, but they repaired it, okay? And then they would not have to add GFCI protection to it. Well, they added and said, look, if you're going to go out and you're going to service, and then again, this is, who's going to be the guardian of this? This is kind of like an honor system to me. Because if I'm called out because the pump's not working, probably you're not going to call you're not going to get a permit. You're not going to get inspection. You're just going to go out. So this is an honor system. So this is basically saying, look, when the pool pump motor is going to be replaced or repaired, and typically if you replace it, I would think you'd get a permit. But again, most people probably don't. When you repair it, they probably wouldn't. But now, whether you're repairing it or replacing it, it says the replaced or repaired pump motor shall be provided with ground fault protection complying with 680.5B or C. And again, it depends on the pump. It depends on the system, whether it's 150 volts to ground, or which is a 12240 volt application, or it's one of those that may be for a commercial application or something like that that is going to have over 150 volts. Okay, so that's why it gives you those two options, right? And the content here, it says, even though the original installation might have not provided GFCI protection for the swimming pool pump motor, a new or rebuilt pump motor installed to replace a failed motor is required to have that protection. So the cost just went up. So you as a technician, it's up to you to go out, and if you're going to replace it or repair that motor for a pump, for a pool, now you're going to have to do more. You're going to have to go on and get the GFCI protection, okay? If it's a cord and plug, it's easy because then you can just replace the receptacle with a GFCI type and then you're okay, right? So again, depending on what you're dealing with. So, I mean, that is on you, because what happens if you get in trouble and you don't do that and you do a replacement and somebody comes in and somebody gets hurt and you say, well, it wasn't required at the time of inspection, but now if your state is under the 2023 and something happens and it come in and we find out that the owners, they're going to throw you under the bus, we're going to ask something like, okay, was it repaired? Was it replaced? This looks like a new motor. Look at the date on this motor. This system is obviously older than that because the filter's date is different than the motor. If we determine that as a replacement, it was under the 2023 and they did not install GFCI protection, then you have a problem. Now, it may never get detected until something happens. But when it does happen, so I always tell people, and you heard me say this yesterday, when it comes to swimming pools and stuff like that, electricians, just make sure you cross your T's, you dot your I's, you do a little extra, because you know what? If somebody won't throw you under the bus, a homeowner will throw you under the bus in a heartbeat. I'm just saying. Be careful. Err on the side of caution. Okay? It is very common for pump motors to need replacement due to corrosive conditions, okay, where the pump is located. This rule provides the installer with directions to protect the replacement motor with GFCI protection upon replacement of the original motor that may have been installed prior to GFCI protection requirements. This effort will indeed raise the level of safety from electric shock around pool motors and how it's associated with the pump circulating system and the water and all that stuff. So it's incumbent on you to do that. Okay, next, we're going to be looking at light receptacles and equipment. And this is probably the bulk of where people screw things up. When it comes to receptacles, the placement around pools, the lighting around pools, putting a pool in with you have existing lighting that's there, or maybe you're putting a pool in and the structure was already there and there's a receptacle that's already there, and now you're adding the pool. So all these things can come into play. So 680.22, again, we're still in part 2, so we're still talking about permanently installed pools. It says one of the most complicated aspects of 680 is understanding the NEC requirements for installing lights, receptacles, and equipment that is associated with the pool, okay? The next series of sections will attempt to demystify the installation requirements associated with lighting, receptacles, and equipment as it pertains to pools. Okay, we'll start out with 680.22a. This is the required receptacle location. Okay, so we'll go look at that in the code, and then we'll come back to paraphrase. So if we go look at the NEC, this is where we're at, 680.22a. We're dealing just with receptacles right now. So you see here, it says the required receptacle, and where is it to be located? So again, so right off the bat, we got to have a receptacle to help service this pool. Okay, now, could it be one that's already existing on the side of the dwelling? Certainly. Doesn't mean I have to install a new one. But if I don't have one within these parameters, guess what I got to do? I got to provide one. Okay, so here's what it says. Where a permanently installed pool is installed, first caveat, it says no fewer than one 125 volt, 15 or 20 amp receptacle on a general purpose branch circuit. So it doesn't matter whether you're supplying it from the house, doesn't matter. It's a general purpose. Doesn't have to come from the pool pump panel. It's just a general purpose, okay? I have to have a receptacle, and it has to be located not less than 6 feet, okay? So it's at least 6 feet away from the pool, okay? And it has to be not more than 20 feet from the pool. So not closer than 6 feet and not further than 20 feet. That sweet spot, 6 feet away, not more than 20 feet. If you already have a receptacle that's on the side of the house that is 10 feet away from the pool, then you're golden. That's where they can plug into. This discourages the use of extension cord, okay? Those type of scenarios, right? To try for those that may be longer away. So that's the requirement. So I got to have that. Now it says 20 anywhere. It's got to be 6 feet, but not more than 20 feet from the inside wall of the pool. Okay. This receptacle shall be located not more than 6 feet 6 above the floor, platform, or grade level serving the pool. Okay. So it's got to be 6 feet away from the pool, inside wall of the pool. Okay. You know, where the water touches the side of the pool. So 6 feet inside of the pool, at least 6 feet away, not more than 20 feet away. And that required receptacle can't be higher than what? 6'6". Okay. 6 foot 6 inches. So 6.5 feet. That's a required receptacle. Makes sense? Okay. So you got to have at least one. Again, it does not mean I have to install a new one if where I'm installing the pool already has that. Now, if you're installing out in the middle of the backyard, like at Tom's house where he's living in this mansion, then his pool's probably down near a gazebo and down near a bunch of fancy stuff. So in that scenario, you're going to have to make sure that you have a general purpose branch circuit there in order to be able to have a receptacle there. And it has to be within 20 feet, but not closer than 6 feet from that pool. Okay, so that's your receptacle. Can you have more than one? Yes. Do you have to have at least one? Absolutely you do. Okay. Now, the next, again, we're under receptacles still. Okay. The next one is circulating and sanitation system location. Okay, so now if the receptacle is used down by the mermaids, if a receptacle is used to provide power, for example, to circulation and sanitation systems, okay, such as water pump motors and other relocated loads necessary for the circulation and sanitation, okay, well then we have a rule for that. Here's what it says. It says now, receptacles that provide power to water pump motors or for other loads directly related to the circulation and sanitation system shall be located at least 6 feet from the inside wall of the pool. These receptacles shall have GFCI protection and be of the grounding type. Okay? So, think about it. In this scenario, if I have a receptacle that is for the circulation, whether it's the pump motor, if that receptacle is for that system, it's not requiring one. If I do have a receptacle that is for the sanitation, you'd plug into it. Or if the pool pump motor, if you plug into it, that receptacle, it's just saying, you know what? It cannot be less than 6 feet. Okay? It cannot be located less than 6 feet. All right? Now, can it be more? Absolutely, it can be more than 6 feet. That type of thing. And it has to be GFCI protected. Okay? All right, so getting back to our lesson, that's what we cover here. So I'm just paraphrasing these for you rather than to read all this stuff on the screen for you, just so you know. So the next one was A3. It says other receptacle locations, okay? Now, it says if there are any other receptacles, okay? It says such as other voltages or those determined to be other than those referenced in 680.22a. And there is other types of receptacles out there that may be available that aren't the ones like we're talking about, just receptacles that you're plugging in, for example, an attachment plug into it, okay? That type of thing. So if there are other receptacles such as other voltages other than what's discussed so far, or those determined to be other than those referenced in 680.22a, they are required to be located, again, not less than 6 feet from the inside wall of the pool. So here's the rule. Receptacle outlets, outlets in general, those type of things, an outlet for the sanitation, if you happen to have a cord and plug for the pump, they cannot be within 6 feet of the pool, okay? That's your golden rule. Used to be 5 feet, by the way, okay? And it is been moved up and bumped up to 6 feet in the last couple cycles, okay? So nothing within 6 feet when it comes to receptacles. Makes sense? All right. And then lastly, in this one, for the receptacles, just a catch-all, is I'll go back to the NEC for this one right here, because you see a lot of grayed out right here, okay? A lot of tan language. This is number 4. This is ground fault circuit interrupters and, of course, special purpose ground fault circuit interrupters. Again, depending on, again, the voltage you're dealing with, because that's the trigger for those special purposes, right? All receptacles rated 125 volts through 250, 60 amperes or less, located within 20 feet. Okay, so those within 6 feet away from the pool and those up to 20 feet, okay, of the inside wall of the pool shall have GFCI protection complying with 680.5b. That is the ones that are 150 volts to ground. It says, or the SP GFCI, those are the ones that are over 150 volts. But what you will notice that receptacle that's on the side of your house that maybe is serving double duty, right? That was maybe within 20 feet, but not closer than 6 feet. And you're like, I'm done. I don't have to do anything extra. That was already required to be GFCI protected by 210.8a, right? So it's already covered. So this is really if you're adding an additional one, maybe that's not already being covered by the structure that's already there, then it's just reminding you that it's a no-brainer, right? Plus, you got to remember it's a receptacle outside probably anyway, so it's going to be GFCI protected. And you remember what we talked about earlier as far as part 1? That the pump room, the pool pump room, that also now requires at least one receptacle, and it has to be GFCI protected on its own, okay? Picking up all these things, right? What does Tom say? Tom says, Tom lives a simple life. I have a creek in my backyard. Article 682, natural and artificial bodies of water only apply to my naturally made body of water that he likes to take it. God, that reminds me of Caddyshack for some reason, where Carl says he wants to come over. He asks, Carl asks the Chevy, which is, what's his name in that movie? Tab? Is it Tab? They ask him, what's the name of Charlie? Chevy. Anyway, he says Carl wants to come over and use his pool, and Chevy Chase goes, pool, or we have a pond in the back. We have a pond, a pool or pond, whichever. You don't want him in the pool, buddy. I don't know why. Caddyshack is one of my top 3 favorite movies. If y'all didn't know, my top 3 favorite movies, as if you care, it's Caddyshack, and Breakfast Club, and number 1 is Saturday Night Fever. Those are Paul's top 3 favorite movies. I watch them over and over and over. I just love the movies. I just love the structure of the Breakfast Club. I love the story. It's amazing they didn't do a part 2. I don't know why they didn't do that, because I wanted to see what happened on Monday when they all went back to school. You know what I'm saying? But Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta, it's my all-time. That is my all-time thing. All right, let's look back at the lesson real quick. So kind of a visual. Here's your pool, right? Here we go. And you see the measurement, okay? I don't like this line right here, by the way. I think it should be, but it's kind of in line with this, so type of thing. But I could argue that this coping right here, that actually is a measurements from right here, because that's immediately in, okay? So anyway, so here's the 6 feet. So can it be closer than 6 feet? Right here. And not further than 20 feet. Got to have that at least 1. Okay, so that's the one that requires that at least 1. Okay, any receptacle within this position here has to be GFCI protected. Okay, makes sense? Hopefully that makes sense. All right. All right, now, of course, you know that the location we also require, as we saw, we also require that there's GFCI protection in the pool pump room, right? Okay. But I like this illustration. And I'll tell you why I like this, and I don't know that I can blow this up too bad without losing it. Okay. Here's your pool pump room. Okay. Right. So this right here, so this is 6 feet. It's on the wall right here. So it's 6 feet away from the pool, right? So it is GFCI protected, right? Okay. Now, this is your house, right? This is a house. This isn't a pool pump room. This is a house. So these receptacles right here are inside of the structure. They're not, they're definitely within 20 feet, but they go through the wall, through a door, all this stuff. So these in here, okay, they're not required to be GFCI protected. This is, right? This one right here on the side, right here, if it's within 20 feet, just because I got the ones required here, maybe this one's over here for the sanitation pump, right? Then that would be required to be GFCI protection. If it's within 20 feet of the pool, okay, as the crow flies, take a string and draw that string and just pull it straight from the pool right there inside, then that would require GFCI protection. Now, notice down here, the pool equipment room, notice that requires GFCI protection now, anything, okay? So that requires it. There you go, okay? So Ryan's question, again, we're not there yet. So when you get to 6, 8, and 20, can you get into some extra depth? Of course we are. You know, I'm gonna explain it enough that you understand it. That's my goal, to do it. Okay. So I'll do my best. Okay. All right. So now let's go on. So that is that. So now it talks about how you do the measurement, by the way. Okay. So the measurement right here. So determine all these distances, by the way. It says the determination of the dimensions in this section addressing receptacle spacing. It says the distance to be measured shall be the shortest path the supply cord of an appliance connected to the receptacle would follow without piercing the floor, wall, ceiling, doorway with hinges or sliding doors, open windows, and other effective barriers. Now, that used to be the way that we did it when measuring GFCI protection in 210.8, but we moved the doorway requirement, okay? But here, that measurement still breaks the measurement, the doorway. So that's why you saw inside. So I could have my house right there 6 feet away from the pool, and I have receptacles that are on the inside of the house, right? But that doorway breaks the measurement, or it stops the measurement, okay? So that's not the same when for example, when we have a kitchen and we have a cabinet underneath the kitchen and we have a receptacle down there, and receptacles within 6 feet used to be required to have GFCI protection. But it used to be that the cabinet would break that measurement. Then it went away and the cabinet didn't break the measurement. Now, in the 2023, in the kitchen, they all have to be GFCI protected anyway. Okay, so you see how we progressed. I'm surprised that we as a code panel didn't remove this, knowing that people probably will run cords through the doorway into that room if they didn't have a receptacle right there. Okay, so we didn't really, nobody submitted it, right? So anyway, here's what it is. All right, so that's receptacles, folks. Believe it or not, everything you need to know about receptacles. You're required at least one. Can't be closer than 6. Can't be more than 20 feet. You can have other ones, that's fine. But they all outside have to be GFCI protected. Okay, makes sense. Easy way to remember that. If I have sanitation or circulation and it's cord and plug connected to a receptacle, then it can't be a receptacle can't be closer than 6 feet. But it has to be GFCI protected regardless of its location. Got it? And obviously from part 1, if I have a pool pump room, any receptacle that's installed in that pool pump room has to be GFCI protected. Okay? All right, let's see here. All right, where are we at? Okay, let's go into luminaires. We're going to talk about lighting outlets, and ceiling suspended paddle fans. All right, so the very first one, easy peasy. Okay, it is new outdoor installation clearances. So this is a pool outside, and we're putting in lighting, outdoor installations. We're going to put in all these things, lighting outlets, luminaires, and all this stuff outside. Okay, so what does the code say? It says in outdoor pool areas, luminaires, lighting outlets, and ceiling suspended paddle fans installed above the pool. Okay, so that's the first thing. Anything above the pool, okay, or the area that extends 5 feet horizontally from the inside wall of the pool shall be installed at a height of not less than 12 feet above the maximum water level of the pool. Okay, I can give you a visual. Some people like the visuals. Okay, we are visual learners. So there you go. So 5 feet out, okay, 5 feet out over the pool and 5 feet out, any new luminaire, lighting outlet, whatever you put in, if it is general outdoor luminaires, etc., not less than 12 feet above maximum water level. So you're measuring from the maximum water level. Okay. And this extends 5 feet beyond the edge of the pool. Okay. All right. So again, what we're dealing with back in the code, we'll go back to the NEC, I'll bring it back here. It says in those areas that we just described, okay, it says outdoor pool areas, luminaires, lighting outlets, and suspended ceiling fans installed above a pool or the areas extending 5 feet horizontally from the inside wall of the pool shall be installed at a height of not less than 12 feet above the maximum water level. So, can I install it lower? No, not outdoors. Okay, it's got to be greater than 12 feet if it's over the pool or 5 feet out. So think of this little a little cocoon that goes over it. 12 feet high and 5 feet out, this little umbrella that sits over it. Okay, there you go. All right, so there's that one. Next, all right, that's outdoor. That's simple when it comes to the lighting, okay, or ceiling fans. So what do? Just make it higher than 12 feet, okay, if you've got the space to do it, right? All right. Now, indoor clearances. For installations in indoor pool areas, the ceiling shall be the same as for outdoor areas. Okay, so it's still the same 12 feet, okay, unless modified as provided in this paragraph. Okay, so the general rule is indoor, outdoor, same rules apply, okay? Everything, same clearances apply, 5 and 12. But then it says, however, it says if the branch circuit supplying the equipment is protected by GFCI, it says the following equipment shall be permitted at a height of not less than 7'6" above the maximum water level. So if you GFCI protect it, we're going to let you come down a little bit. I don't know why you wouldn't GFCI protect those other ones anyway, even though you're not required. Hey, anywhere around the pool, I tell you, cautious, always cautious, okay? There you go. I'm not a historian, Paul, so I don't really go back on the research, but typically it's probably because the typical cord is probably 6 feet. I would say that would probably be one of the reasons, that type of thing. But I be honest with you, I do get a lot of questions. I am not a historian, so I don't go back and research those type of things because I really don't care. That's why I don't collect code books, because I don't give a crap about what happened in 1950s and 60s and 70s and 80s unless I have to go research it, for example, for a court case, that type of thing. But I would say it was probably 1, to harmonize, and 2, standard length of cords. But you could probably find that really easy if you go back to when it changed from 5 to 6. It was probably in what's called the public input that was submitted, and justification was submitted, and I'm sure it's there. I don't know other than the 6-foot deal. I'm not totally sure with that. I would assume that's probably one of the reasons. Let's see here. Where was that at? Okay. So again, the caveat now to drop it down to 7'6" the 5 feet out and 12 feet up to be within, to drop it down to 7'6", you have some caveats, okay? It has to be a total enclosed luminaire, okay? So no open bulbs. And a ceiling suspended paddle fan identified for use beneath ceiling structures such as provided on porches and patios. So basically, if your ceiling fan is rated for a wet location and things like that, then it's going to be more than fine for that type of scenario, right? So if you go down here, you look right here. So let's look right here. Is kind of look at this picture. So here's our general rule: 5 feet out. Okay, in typical, it would be 5 feet out, 12 feet up. However, we do have an allowance right here. So look at these right here. This is totally enclosed. Right here. These are totally enclosed. This is a dome. This is so 1970s, but anyway, total dome. So indoor area, and if the GFCI protected, luminaires and ceiling suspended paddle fans that are permitted to be 7'6" above the water, right? Water right here, okay? Maximum water level. And by the way, typically the maximum water level is the point where the water would flow out of the actual pool, okay? So that's why they're measuring it like this, because this would be maximum water level is the maximum the pool can hold before it would run out, okay? So anyway, that's 7'6", right? Okay. All right, now B. Now B has to do with an existing luminaire, okay? We haven't looked at that yet. So we'll look at the code, but that's for an existing luminaire that happened to already be there, right? It's already in place, not something new. It is already there, okay? So we need to look at what B covers right here. So we got to look at B. So let's go back to the NEC. And so this is talking about B, and that is existing installations right here, okay? So it says, look, existing luminaires and lighting outlets located less than 5 feet measured horizontally, okay? So sometimes depending on where you put the pool, you can't get that 5 feet away in order to keep it up 12 feet, right? So you can't get it. The structure is already there. You can't do anything about it, right? All right. So if that's the case, if I have an existing luminaire or lighting outlet located less than 5 feet measured horizontally from the inside wall of the pool, shall be not less than 5 feet above the surface of the maximum water level. So you still got to measure it. And most all cases, I would think, even if it's a wall mounted next to a door, there's a high probability that it's going to at least be 5 feet high. I mean, come on. I don't know why it would be lower. So it's got to at least be 5 feet above the maximum water level. But here's the big thing. It shall be rigidly attached to the existing structure and shall be protected by ground fault circuit interrupters. So in this scenario right here, this is the existing one right here, okay? I zoom in a little bit for you. Right here. This is the existing one right here. So it was already in place, and it is rigidly connected. That's a light box in the ceiling. So it at least has to be 5 feet up if it's in this 5 foot zone and it's existing. That's okay to be there, but it has to be rigidly supplied, okay? Right there, all right? And that would be okay to be there. It's existing, okay? But you also may, as an electrician, you may have to now go in and make sure that you price for a GFCI because you're going to need the GFCI protected in order to leave that existing luminaire there. Now, you could cap it off. In this picture, for example, if all this was here, then you may not need this one, so you might be able to cap it off, that type of thing, okay? But again, if it falls within those parameters, I would leave it. It's perfectly fine, okay? Now, looking down here, we have a C. C says GFCI protection for luminaires not required if rigidly attached. So this is area, notice it is further than the 5 feet away, okay? It's further than 5 feet away, okay? So that is not going to be a problem, okay? And let's see, what else? D says luminaires permitted if GFCI protected. So in this scenario right here, you see this rule right here, okay? What are we talking about? This little space right here. Okay, let's go back to the code really quickly. So again, we're still talking existing. Here's the existing. right? So it says that was that. Oh, excuse me. We're not on the existing nail. We're talking now about number 4. This is the requirement for that space that we just looked at. It says luminaires, lighting outlets, and suspended ceiling fans installed in the areas extending between 5 feet, so we're past the 5 feet, okay, and 10 feet horizontally from the inside wall of the pool shall have GFCI protection complying with 680.5B or 680.5C, depending on the voltage to ground, that type of thing, okay? Unless installed not less than 5 feet above the maximum water level and rigidly attached to the structure adjacent to the enclosed pool, okay? So that was, we're talking about D. If you have any questions, please ask, because I know it's a lot of info, okay? So I am able to have one in here, okay? In here, it is between that 5 and 10. I can have it in here as long as it's what? Okay, it can be in here as long as it's GFCI protected, okay? And it's in this space, okay? All right, well, let me get this back to the full size so you can see it. That's probably close enough. So here we go right here. So this is what it's talking about, adjacent areas to the pool. So luminaires, lighting outlets, and ceiling suspended pedal fans installed in the area extending 5 feet and 10 feet. Okay, that was the picture we saw. Horizontally from the inside wall of the pool shall have GFCI protection complying with 680.5B or SPGFCI, which y'all may not be familiar with. That's new into the code, special purpose ground fault circuit interrupter. Again, it's all about the voltage to ground. Protection complying with 680.5C as applicable unless installed not less than 5 feet above the maximum water level and it's rigidly attached. So if it's above that 5 and it's rigidly attached, that was that little area up there, the C, then I don't need GFCI protection on it, okay? All right, let's see. Okay, cord and plug connected luminaires. So B5 says cord and plug connectedness. So I have cord and plug connected luminaires shall comply with the requirements of 680.8 where installed within 16 feet of any point of the water surface measured, it says, radially out in all types of directions. Now, I don't have an illustration for that, so let's go to the code and see. So that is right here. And it might have an illustration. Oh, they've got a pretty decent illustration, just like what we have, but I'll show you that in a second. So what we're talking about is the cord and plug connected luminaires. So these could have luminaires that you screw in that maybe have a cord and plug to connect and you're putting receptacles or whatnot. So cord and plug connected luminaires shall comply with the requirements of 680.8. If we click on that, these are the rules for cord and plug connected equipment. And this has a link to the cord link. Talks about the equipment ground, talks about the construction. So assuming your cord and plug connected luminaire meets all of these requirements, okay? Has an equipment ground in it, not smaller than 12 gauge, meets 250.122 for sizing of the equipment ground. All that stuff probably going to be already inherent with the cord if you buy it, okay? So probably something you don't think about when you buy it that way, all right? But again, when we say 16 feet, so you have to meet all of these rules. If radially in all directions or wherever you install it, 16 feet in all directions, okay, of the surface of the water, okay? And let's see. And I don't know that it doesn't have an image for that, okay? There's no image for that. So let's see, visual. Let me give you a visual. Here's your pool. 16 feet in all directions. Radially. All around it. Here's your pool. If this cord and plug connected luminaire is within that radial footprint, then you've got to meet those additional rules that are required under 680.8. Okay? All right. That's the best I can give you. All right, so I will tell you that the link does a good job with this. I will show you link real quick. This does a good job of all those things we just summarized for you. So this is the outdoor pool requirements right here. And then they got one for indoor, right? So this is really good if you're in Link and you're doing pools. You should really have Link anyway. But example, see the numbers? So A says luminaires, lighting outlets, and ceiling suspended paddle fans permitted above 12 feet. Yep. So up to 12 feet. Okay. B. Okay. Not permitted in B. Permitted in A, which is above the 12 feet. Makes sense. Next, you have C. This area. This is 5 feet out. Okay. And 5 feet up. In this area right here, it says existing luminaires and lighting outlets permitted in this space if rigidly attached to the existing dwelling. Still going to require GFCI protection, but this gives you allowance to leave some stuff that may be there prior to when you came and did the pool. That's not a problem, okay? Next is D. So this is the zone that is out 5 feet to 10 feet, okay? This zone out here. And can I have them in here? And can I have a lighting, like say a lighting outlet that's less than 5 feet high right here? Yeah, I can have luminaires and lighting outlets permitted if it's protected by GFCI. And that's considered adjacent. That would be fine, okay? What about E? It is, again, further than 5 feet away, but it is higher than 5 feet. So that is E. So what does E say? E says luminaires and lighting outlets permitted if they are rigidly attached, okay? Rigidly attached and would not require GFCI protection out here, okay? All right, there you go. So that's kind of a synopsis of everything, right? And then, of course, for the indoor, very similar. The only difference is right here. You can have them lower than 12 feet, provided that if it is what? That it's actually one of those that are totally enclosed luminaire, or the suspended ceiling fan is rated for like a wet location or the application of where it's been installed. Then that could be less, but it can't be lower than 7'6". Okay, all right. Notice that. Okay, keep that in mind. Anyway, that's a really good reference for those that are interested in that type of thing. Okay, all right. So now let's move on to what about switching devices? So we know we got all, we're pretty good. Rigidly attached, screwed by screws, 632s, 832s, whatever it is, screwed to the side of the wall. The lighting outlet is mounted to the wall, screwed to it. That's rigidly attached. Okay, not hung on a hook. It can move it around. You can grab it. It has to be attached rigidly. Screws, bolts, nuts, whatever. That's rigid. That's what we mean. What does Mitch say? Hey, Paul, how about receptacles that are within 20 feet of the pool being used for outdoor kitchen equipment? It doesn't matter because basically the GFC requirement also kicked in that said any receptacle within 20 feet. But I'll remind you that any receptacle that's located outside is going to be required to be GFCI protected anyway. So the moment that you said outdoors, then it's going to have to be GFCI protected because 210.8 says all outdoor receptacles are to be GFCI protected. Okay? So it's already going to cover that. Switching devices. Switches. Snap switches. Simple. We're talking about lighting, so keep it simple. Any type of switching device. So switching devices shall be located at least 5 feet horizontally, okay, from the inside wall of the pool, unless there's a barrier there that would force you to have to reach around it, like a solid barrier where it would, in theory, be further than a 5 foot reach, okay? So you could have a pool that's right next to a wall that has a gate. Maybe they put the switch because of limited space. Maybe they put the switch on around the wall on the other side of the gate. Yes, the switch through the wall would be less than 5 feet, but as it wraps around that solid fence or solid barrier, it would be less than 5 feet, but that wall is in the way, so you literally could not reach it from the pool. That's okay too. Okay. But in general, when you're installing these switches, again, why do you have to be careful? Because sometimes these pools will come right up to the side of a house these days, okay, or a building. And so you might not be thinking about it, and you put the switch right there on the wall for convenience to turn on some lighting, let's say in the pool. It is right there, and it cannot be within 5 feet, okay? All right, so let's look at what it says. Okay, so here's what it says in the code. It says switching devices shall be located at least 5 feet horizontally from the inside wall of the pool unless separated from the pool by a solid fence, wall, or other permanent barrier that provides at least 5 foot reach distance, okay? Alternatively, a switch that is listed as being acceptable for use within 5 feet shall be permitted. Now, what does that mean, okay? So as a code panel, it was brought to our attention, for example, that sometimes you have electrical pool lift, electronic pool lifts, electrical pool lifts, electrically powered pool lifts. You have other pieces of equipment that may have a switch built into it, but it is part of the equipment. It's evaluated. It may be in a separate enclosure that's sealed. It may have a gasket over it. It was designed as part of the equipment. Well, if it's part of the listing of the equipment and it has a switch in it, then that's okay within that 5 feet. But not a normal snap switch, not a normal where you flip it up and you flip a toggle, things like that. That can't be within 5 feet. So you route it however you have to route it, okay? But sometimes you may run into a piece of equipment that may have, for pools, so it's listed for pool application. You may run into a electrically powered pool lift that literally has a built-in switch on it. It's a disconnect switch. It's built into the switch. That's okay within 5 feet because it's been evaluated and listed as part of that, okay? So maintaining this separation of at least 5 feet helps ensures those individuals enjoying the pool will not accidentally or hopefully not intentionally touch the metal enclosure that houses the switch or any potentially energized components typically associated with a switch, whether it's a switch, whether it's usually they'll say a switch is a Bakelite or it's non-metallic and you touch it, those type of things. But there's always a possibility of water. It's raining. You might enjoy your pool, whatever, in when it's raining or in the winter and you have moisture that gathers on it, whatever, anything like that. We don't want that to be an issue to come in contact with that, okay? And if we look at the NEC, again, the measurements on all those other things are the shortest path, draw a string and pull it tight, the same path that a cord would travel. That's how you measure these things, distances. So here's the switching requirement right here, okay? Switching devices. Didn't say just toggle switch, okay? Switching devices, okay? You'll also know that the same requirement, if you remember, was for the maintenance disconnect. It is a switching device, but it's also a maintenance disconnect. Back in part 1, it still could not be within 5 feet. Makes sense? And you're also going to see that same requirement when it comes to hot tubs and spas, okay? Because it's going to make reference to it. Something to keep in your mind, 5 feet, okay? That type of thing. Now, this right here is other outlets, any other outlet, okay? Again, in the informational note, this is a great example of informational note because I've had people say, if you lock in on outlets and you think only receptacles and they're not outlets, they're devices, but if your mind goes right there, then you can get lost when you see things like other outlets. And that's why we tried to tell that educator who tried to get outlets changed to be receptacles, you can't do it that way because there are so many other outlet opportunities. Fire alarms, smoke alarms. Smoke alarms in a dwelling, for example, is an outlet that you mount a smoke alarm to, okay, in a residential, okay? So there are so many other outlet opportunities where you're taking something from the system that we have to be very generic. So we have to create a catch-all. So here's what it says. It says, other outlets. It says, other outlets shall not be less than 10 feet from the inside wall of the pool. Measures shall be determined in accordance with 680.22A5. Again, measuring as a straight line, as a crow would fly. Now, This is an informational note, and I think these things can be very helpful. Now, we don't want informational notes to become like your for schools, right? We don't want this to be an instructional document. That's not what we want the NEC to be. But this is a great example. It says, other outlets may include, but are not limited to, remote control. You might have some signaling there. Might have a fire alarm outlet there that you mount a sensor on, or you might mount on a strobe on, or you might mount a horn on, or something, okay? And maybe even communication outlets. Maybe there's a communication speaker system, audible system, or whatever that you would take and you mount some type of component onto it, okay? Those are examples of other outlets, and they have to be kept what? They have to be kept 10 feet away from where? Okay, 10 feet from the inside wall of the pool. Makes sense? Okay. All right. And then, of course, you have other equipment. What does that mean? Well, other equipment with ratings exceeding the low voltage contact limit, which is defined in the National Electrical Code. So people that will look at that and say, low voltage contact limit, there's certain values under the definition of low voltage contact limit. So typical, for example, I just make it simple for you, the 120 volt type of stuff, that other equipment, obviously that's going to exceed the low voltage contact limit. Okay. So if we have other equipment, whatever it may be, we can lump a lot of things in equipment. It says other equipment with ratings exceeding the low voltage contact limit shall be located at least 5 feet horizontally from the inside wall of the pool, unless separated from the pool by a solid fence, wall, or other permanent barrier. Okay. And again, just so we tune into this, I will go to Article 100 and show you what we're talking about so that you know what those voltage values are. And let's see if I can find it. I think it's under L for low voltage contact limit. Let's see. Let's see here. Let's see if I'm right. I might not be. Let's see. There we go. Low voltage contact limit right here. So what is it? That. So where the voltage, the low voltage contact limit is a voltage not exceeding the following. So 15 volt RMS, sinusoidal AC. This is generally generated directly within the piece of equipment, and it'll tell you whether it is this or not. 21.2 volts peak for non-sinusoidal AC. 30 volts for continuous DC, or 12.4 volts peak for DC that is intentionally rated at 10 to 20 hertz. Okay. So again, you've got some commentary. So the low voltage contact limit are based on wet contact limits, and there are some tables in Table 11A and 11B in Chapter 9 that talks about all these low voltage contact limits and all that kind of other good stuff. I'll pop it up here so you can see it. Here is talking about it, and you'll see that there's a table here that has a lot of good information on here. So an inherent limited power source overcurrent protection talks about Class 2 and Class 3 and all these different things down here, okay? All you got to remember is what is marked on the piece of equipment. If it is over those low voltage contact limits, then it has to stay at least 5 feet away from the pool, okay? All right, let's get back to what we're talking about. All right, so let's get back to the lesson. Now let's talk about underwater luminaires, okay? So now the underwater luminaires, there's three different types that you'll run into, guys. And that is a wet niche, a dry niche, and a no niche. These luminaires will mount in that, either one of those. So the main thing to remember about a wet niche is that the frame is installed in the frame structure of a pool, okay? And the niche where the luminaire is going to mount into gets water inside of it. So it's not sealed. So there's water that gets around. It helps cool the luminaire. And then you have a cord that runs up through the wiring method or the raceway that goes up to a pool deck box. Okay? That's a wet niche. A dry niche means that the niche itself that the luminaire mounts into is dry. Now, we have definitions of all these, by the way, in Article 100. But a dry niche is sealed. So when you put the luminaire in it, water doesn't get into the area. So that's the dry niche. And then a no niche type of luminaire is a luminaire that mounts that is all self-contained. It doesn't have any niche at all. You just simply buy the assembly and it actually has mounting brackets and you'll mount it to the side of the pool. And they do have the time that mount through the pool on the side of certain types of pool. They have some that mount into the framework. Those are called no niche. And they're just like what they sound like. They have no niche. Okay. There's nothing that you mount those into. They come already as an assembly. Okay. All right. Just wanted to get that out of the way first before we dig deep into the luminaire stuff. And let me go on and get into that real quick. Okay. Underwater luminaires. A1, design, normal operation. Okay, it says the design of an underwater luminaire supplied from a branch circuit. That's what it is, folks. Branch circuit coming from your pool deck box, usually down. Okay, circuit either directly or by way of a transformer or power supply meeting the requirements of this section shall be such that, okay, we're talking about the luminaire, such that where the luminaire is properly installed without a GFCI, there is no shock hazard with any likely combination of faulty conditions during normal use, not relamping. Okay, now, there are conditions where the underwater luminaire may be installed without a GFCI protection. Okay, such as those supplied by, let's say, an isolated winding type transformer with an ungrounded secondary with a metal barriers between the primary and secondary. So it has a separation. So these are certain types of luminaires that may be installed underwater that are being supplied from an isolated winding type of transformer. It's all pool equipment. It's all listed for this application. In those scenarios, the instructions will make it very clear that in that scenario, you're not going to have GFCI protection that goes down. Now, that doesn't remove possible GFCI protection on a supply side of this transformer, okay? That's a whole different topic. But you're not going to have GFCI protection directly for the luminaire that's underwater in those unique type of systems. Now, if you're dealing with the 120 volt, which I cringe, but they're still available, you could still use them, still permitted, those that are installed will have GFCI protection, okay? Without doubt, okay? Now, let's go back here and read it again. Now, in those type of scenarios, it says both transformers and power supplies, if they're used, are required to be listed, labeled, and identified for swimming pool use. That is so critical because if you get one of these types of lighting systems that is utilizing an isolated winding type transformer, then you have to make sure that it is evaluated. So it is listed, it is labeled as such, and it has identification on it that makes it very clear that it's for a swimming pool application. This is not a Frankenstein type of thing where you can piecemeal stuff together. Not going to work, okay? Now, typically these transformers and power supplies operate with an output voltage at or below the low voltage contact limit, okay? So that's why you saw the other requirement, whereas when you operate below the low voltage contact limit, then GFCI protection is not required. That type of scenario, okay? All right, so that is A1, okay? And it also gets into A2, okay? Now, A2, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time in that one. That was A1, that was normal applications. A2 is specifically to transformers and power supplies, okay? So if that's what you're installing, that's what it's marked at, that's what it's labeled, then you follow this rules right here. Again, it's still all about the markings, okay? All this type of thing, right? And I don't have, you just got to follow the instructions on the installation, okay? But this is pretty cut and dry. You just follow the installation if you have this type of system. But again, typically it's going to be class 2, it's going to be low contact level values. It's not going to be the same as what we would deal with, 120 volt applications, things like that. Those are very specific type of systems. And you'll buy those. Rainbirds are for landscape lighting. They're not for use with pools. Pools, you're going to find manufacturers that make stuff just for the pool lighting application, okay? All right, what about lamping? What about GFCI protection for lamping? Okay, so this is a scenario that we're not talking the low voltage contact. We're talking things that would be above that. So normal 120, things like that. Any system that would operate above that low contact level that you saw us talk about. So let's talk about that. So lamping. I mean, you're going to have to replace the lamp at some point, right? It's going to burn out, whatnot. Okay, so what does the code say about relamping and servicing? Well, here's what it says. It says, inevitably, the lamp used in pool luminaires will need to be replaced or relamped. To protect the individuals in the pool and those doing the replacement or relamping, ground fault circuit and rub protection for personnel is required to be installed in the branch circuit supplying luminaires if they operate at voltages greater than the low voltage contact limit as defined in Article 100. So I have to have it in the branch circuit, okay? So this one says, okay, well, I can't do it at the feeder. I have to have this in the branch circuit. So I have people that ask me this all the time, say, if I had a panel and the whole panel was GFCI protected, would that mean that I don't have to put it in the branch circuit? No. This rule specifically says for relamping, servicing, that the GFCI protection has to be installed in the branch circuit, okay? Whether it's a branch circuit breaker or supplied, as we saw earlier in part 1, where it may go through a GFCI device, okay? That type of thing. So I have to have that protection so that if somebody pulls it out, because a lot of times they're not going to drain all the water. They're going to pull it out. It's got a certain length of cord. They're going to put it up on the decking. They're going to work on it. Okay, they may not drain all the water, that type of thing. You never know when the light goes out and it needs to be servicing. So we need to be able to get it out of the water. Okay, it has to be able to reach the decking. But in this case, GFCI is required. Now, I think that you also know that it probably doesn't matter anyway, because all of these lamps, if you're doing this and they're probably going to be above the low voltage contact limit anyway, then you're probably going to put GFCI protection on anyway, so it becomes a moot point. But I think it's just important for everybody to understand that, okay? Also, voltage limitations, okay? So what does that mean? It says, this is for luminaires now. There is a voltage limitation. It says, no luminaire, period, shall be installed for operation on the supply circuits over 150 volts between conductors. Okay, so between conductors, you cannot exceed 150 volts. Okay, so 120 volt circuits, like that type of thing. So 208 volts is going to exceed 150 volts between conductors. Okay, so what do we see here? Typically, the branch circuit that supplies a pool underwater luminaire are 120 volts, or they using the low voltage contact limit type, so they usually have the ones that are isolated winding transformer. Okay, a little more money. I can tell you in my career, the majority of the pools that I dealt with as a contractor, they were all 120 volt luminaires. Just the way it was. I'm a big believer in dealing with the low voltage type. With the LEDs that we have now, I like that better. But I'm just dating myself. Most of the stuff that I dealt with was 120 volt type of things. Now, an example of a circuit that would exceed 150 volts between conductors is a 277, okay? But we typically would not find that in a residential application anyway. But again, the rule is the rule. It's not residential specific, okay? But the rule is the rule, okay? All right. All right, now, what about those luminaires if they're wall mounted? So we're going to put them in the side of the pool, you know, whatever. And most of the time I saw them under the diving board. But there was other ones that people would put all around the pool. Some of the high-end homes that I did, those pools, believe it or not, they had the wet niches and they had them all over the pool. They like to light that sucker up. Okay. Well, there is a specific requirement for where you locate them. Okay. So if you're going to be installing in it, it says luminaires installed in walls shall be installed with the top of the luminaire lens, okay, so the top of the lens, okay, not less than 18 inches below the normal water level of a pool, okay, not the top, below the normal water level. So where is the normal water level, by the way? If you have skimmers, the skimmers will keep the water at a normal water level, keeps it from overflowing, okay? So in a failure, you can have maximum water level is from the point where it would spill out. But when we make references like normal water level, is what is the water level going to be at under normal conditions? Not maximum, like if it stops or they get stopped up, that's the maximum water level. The normal water level is going to be like at the skimmer level, okay? So that's where the water would be normally, right? And so it says below, it can't be not less than 18 inches below the normal water level of the pool. unless the luminaire is listed and identified for use at lesser depths, and they will be printed on it. They will be marked on it. They will say that because they're very aware of this 18-inch requirement. So if you don't think that a manufacturer that makes that the normal luminaire would have to be what, no less than 18 inches down from the normal water level to the top of the lens, if you don't think a manufacturer who makes one that maybe was tested to be used at a lesser depth, that they're going to maybe make sure that that's on their literature because they're going to they want to get an advantage over a normal luminaire that's going to be mounted in the wall, right? So they want to get an advantage. So they're going to mark that on there if they can, okay? Now, it says no luminaire shall be installed less than 4 inches below the normal water line of the pool, okay? And so we see this right here in A5. So I didn't make any of this up. These rules are there. It says it's exactly how I presented it. And you guys are familiar with what we've seen in the last 2 days. There's a maximum water level. And now you understand what a normal water level in the context of the code is. Typically, you have circulation and skimmer scenarios like that. So that would be your normal water level. Okay. Now, what about those luminaires that are in the bottom of the pool? All right. Well, now, again, here, the normal water level is considered the lowest point on the skimmer. Okay. There you go. I kind of already told you that, but there it is. What about the bottom mounted luminaires? Any luminaire that is facing upward are required to have either a lens guard to prevent contact by any person or be listed for use without a guard. So obviously these manufacturers understand this, right? So unless it has a lens guard built into it, or it is listed for no need of a guard, that type of thing, and the manufacturer is going to take care of that for you, and they're going to make sure that you understand all those type of things, okay? So let's see here. Some more commentary. It says, another important factor to consider is the difference in the various underwater luminaires that are covered. So we have the wet niche is one that's intended to be directly mounted in the forming shell of the pool and fountain structure. It's going to have water always around it, okay? The nature of the installation places the luminaire completely surrounded by water. That's why they call it a wet niche. Water is going to be getting all around it, okay? Of course, a dry niche is one that is installed in the floor or the wall of the pool or spa or hot tub or fountain. And even in a storable pool can have a dry niche where the luminaire is sealed against the entry of water. So it can't get around it. It's a dry niche and you follow it. And of course, then we have a no niche, okay? And a no niche, like you said, is a no niche luminaire is just like it sounds. It's to be installed above or below the water without a niche at all, okay? There's no niche, so we don't have limitations. It's a no niche, okay? So where we see that in the code is when you go look at the definitions for it, okay? Under wet niche, no niche, dry niche. All those are defined terms in the National Electrical Code, okay? Now, let's get into some wet niche applications here. The forming shell, what is that? So in a concrete pool, a gunite pool, those type of things, you create the structure of the pool, and the wet niche is designed to support the luminaire. So the wet niche is an assembly, and it's mounted in the pool's framing structure. Then you actually have the luminaire that's designed to mount into the wet niche. So when you pull it out, water is going to get all around that luminaire. So that means that it's typically sealed with a cord that comes out of the back of it. Okay, the wet niche itself is going to have a lug on it to be able to connect it to the equipotential bonding or to the rebar, if that's what you have. That's part of the conductive pool shell, if that's what you have. So you've got this other connection points. The luminaire itself is going to have its equipment ground and everything else part of the cord that runs up the raceway up into the pool deck box, okay? And then we'll talk about deck boxes as well. We'll get to that and all that stuff. Oh, by the way, if you're saying, Paul, I don't want to watch you for the next couple days on this crap, you can always go to Fast Tracks Tube and watch our 8-part series on swimming pools and spas as well, if you want. And that covers all of this the same way, okay? probably spend about as much time as we're going to spend in here on Coffee Hour. So you could say, Paul, I don't want to watch you for the Monday or whatever it is. I'll just go watch that video. Okay. You do you, boo. That's okay. All right. All right, Tom, take care. Okay, now that we understand that each of these types of luminaires, we can begin to see how the NEC rules are going to apply to each one of these. Okay, so let's talk about wet niches first. All right, so wet niche. Let's talk about the forming shell that is going to hold a wet niche luminaire. So we're looking at 680.23b1. It says, forming shells shall be installed for the mounting of all wet niche underwater luminaires and shall be equipped with provisions for conduit entry. Right, because it's got to get it into the wet niche in order to be able to get the cord from the actual luminaire up to the deck box, right? It says the metal parts of the luminaire and the forming shell in contact with the pool water shall be of brass or other approved corrosive resistant materials. All forming shells used with non-metallic conduit systems, okay, so yes, you are allowed to have a non-metallic conduit system like a PVC, other than those that are part of a listed low voltage lighting system, not requiring grounding, shall include provisions for terminating an 8 AWG copper conductor. So if I use a wet niche and I run a brass raceway up or some other approved corrosive resistant metal up to connect to the pool box, then I don't have to run an 8 gauge down to it to connect it to the equipotential bonding. Okay, in those scenarios, I don't have to do that type of thing, because typically that would come into the wet niche and connect to a lug inside the wet niche. Well, I don't have to do that if the wet niche connects to a brass or other corrosive resistant raceway that connects up, then that's all done because it's going to go into a threaded entry into a pool deck box. Then I don't need it. But if I choose to run non-metallic as a choice, then I have to make sure that I include at least an 8 gauge down with that cable to that luminaire so that I can make that termination down in the wet niche. Okay? Important for you to understand that application. Okay? Now, let's see. What about the wiring that is going to extend directly down to the actual wet niche? So it's going from a deck box, let's say, or junction box, or other type of enclosure that meets the requirements of 680.24, which is about the different boxes and enclosures. That's going to go right down to the forming shell, directly down, okay? And we'll have an image of that, but I'll show you. So what does that mean? All right, so that's this right here. So wiring extending directly to the forming shell, where you're going to be putting in the luminaire later. All right, it says, conduit shall be installed from the forming shell to a junction box or other enclosure conforming to the requirements of 680.24. It says conduit shall be rigid metal. It shall be intermediate metal. It shall be flexible non-metallic, okay, or rigid polyvinyl chloride conduit, okay? And we have a figure to look at. So let's look at it right here, okay? So this is talking about what? This is wiring extending directly to the forming shell. So let's look at this picture right here. Hopefully y'all can see this. I'll blow it up a little bit. I don't know I don't know if I can blow it up too big. Let's see. Right now it disappeared. Hold on. Okay, a little bit better picture maybe you can see. Okay, so here's a pool deck box, okay? We'll talk about these when we talk about the boxes, but there you go. All right, so here it's running out, okay? And it's running up. Look, notice it says right here, PVC jacketed MC. Yeah. Running out, coming up to this box. Okay. Right here. All right. Now, coming out and down. This is your wet niche. Right? So if it is metal conduit of red brass or let's say stainless steel coming down, then it's fine. Right? That makes that connection. However, if this happens to be PVC, if PVC conduit is used, then you have to install an 8 gauge insulated copper conductor, okay? And it runs all the way down with it, in it, and you'll notice that it's connecting over to the forming shell, right here, okay? And you also have to seal this connection with a listed potting compound. That is not just your typical like a duck seal. Okay, not gonna work. Okay, so that is what it's talking about right there. Okay, so regardless of what you're running there. Okay, so that's from the deck box down to. Okay, so I can use metal conduit or red brass, and that would make that connection. Or if I'm using PVC, then I'm going to have to install the wire down there to make the connection. Okay, your choice. What do you want to do? Okay. All right, so let's go back to the NEC a little bit. So now here's your options. So this is what allows. You notice that this is been added rigid polyvinyl chloride. Okay, so where it's metal, okay, it shall be brass or stainless steel. Okay, that's strictly from the box directly down to the wet niche. If it's non-metallic, you have to follow these rules, and it's going to tell you that it has to be 8 insulated, solid or stranded. Not a problem. Copper bonding jumper shall be installed in the conduit unless it is the one of those that are listed to the low voltage contact limits, which doesn't require grounding anyway. So then you wouldn't need to worry about that. Okay. It says the bonding jumper shall be terminated in the forming shell, junction box, or transformer enclosure, or ground fault circuit after enclosure. It says that termination of 8 bonding jumper in the forming shell shall be covered with or encapsulated in a listed potting compound to protect the connection from possible deterioration effects of the pool water. Okay, and obviously there is no image of that, so we don't have a good graphic here. Okay, so I wish we had a graphic kind of picture, but we don't have one. I gave you basically a visual type of thing. Oh, well, here we go. Let me get you back to the lesson because we do have kind of a picture. So this is an example right here of the forming shell that's built into the wall right here. You see this forming shell right here? So this, obviously the equipment ground is going to be run through here. This is from the luminaire that's going to mount in here, right? What you see here is obviously this was run down, let's say with a PVC material. Okay, PVC pipe came down and you see that they installed this 8 gauge and it is insulated and they ran it down, okay? Installed it in, right? All the way down, okay? And connected all the way down, and they connected it where? Right here, on this wet niche, and a logo was provided. And they sealed it with a sealing compound, okay? Makes sense? Just want to make sure all that makes sense. One question that somebody typically asks me, and I'll take you back to the NEC just to show you this. Some people ask me this. So see right here, it says where a non-metallic conduit is used. It says the 8 insulated solid or stranded copper bonding jumper shall be installed in the conduit unless it's the listed low voltage type system, not requiring grounding. It says the bonding jumper shall be terminated in the forming shell, yada, yada, yada. Does anybody know, if you look back at this picture, what's being done, but it's not required? Does anybody know? And oh, by the way, you see this red thing in here? That's a pull cord that they install so they can pull the cord for the actual connected onto the luminaire, okay, that mounts in there. Anybody know what's not required? See this color green? This is not required. The bonding jumper is not required to be green. It makes sense to make it green, but it doesn't say anything in the requirement that has to be green, okay? I'm just saying. All right, let's get back to the lesson. I might have blown it up too large. There we go. All right, back to the lesson. All right. All right, let's see here. So that was, went a little far. All right, so let's go a little more. All right. So the termination of the 8 AWG bonding jumper, again, solid or stranded, covered, right, with that potting compound. Not just normal duct seal, by the way, okay? Equipment grounding provisions for cords. Okay, again, other than the low voltage limit type of lighting system where we have that transformer that has isolated windings, and that type of thing, or a metal barrier that separates primary to secondary. Other than those, okay, when you're dealing with the wet niche, they are supplied with a flexible cord or cable, shall have all exposed non-current carrying metal parts connected to an insulated copper equipment grounding conductor that is integral part of the cord or the lamp. And of course, that is going to be green 250.119 because it's integral part of the cord or the cable assembly, okay? This equipment grounding conductor shall be connected to the grounding terminal in the junction box. It's a deck box that's mounted up on the surface, okay? That type of thing. The equipment grounding conductor shall not be smaller than the supply cords and not smaller than 16. So whatever comes in the supply cord that you buy that is part of that luminaire, that's part of the listing. They seal that into the luminaire. Again, we're talking luminaires and wet niches. That goes up through the raceway, goes up into this junction box, pool deck box. I'm sure y'all have seen them where the top just pulls off of it. In that scenario, the equipment ground is already in there. You're going to make that connection. And you're going to have at least 3 terminals that are going to be in that connection. We'll look at that in a second. All right, right here. Luminaire grounding terminations. All right, so the end of the flexible cord jacket and the flexible cord conductor termination within a luminaire shall be covered with or encapsulated in a suitable potting compound that prevents the entry of water into the luminaire through the cord or its conductors, okay? So potting compounds, sealing, making sure you're not gonna have any entry into the luminaire, okay, through the cord or the conductors, okay? In installations where the equipment grounding conductor is installed in the wet niche luminaire, the connections must also be treated similarly to that of the potting compound to protect such connections from the deteriorating effects of pool water in the event of the pool entry into the luminaire. I can tell you most of them, all I see, if it comes out of the cord, this is all RT integral into it. It seals into the back of the luminaire. You put the luminaire in the wet niche, you put on the locking clamps, and you pull the cord up, and that's typically what I've seen, okay? Let's see here. Where else do I want to, let's see here. So let's talk about, what about the bonding of that luminaire? And we're still in the wet niche, by the way. And usually all this will take care of itself, but in that wet niche, so it says the luminaire shall be bonded to and secured to the forming shell by a positive locking device. So when you buy the forming shell that fits a certain type of luminaire, it's already going to have this locking device that's positive. Means, again, you put it in, it holds it in place, okay? And what this does is, because it's very positive, it locks onto it, and you connect it, whether it's through screws that lock it in, that's going to create a low resistance contact between the luminaire and the forming shell, okay, to mate them together, okay? So it says it has to be a positive locking device that ensures a low resistance connection and requires a tool to remove the luminaire. A tool could be something as simple as a screwdriver, folks, okay? Not some kind of specially purchased widget that you need, okay? That's all it needs to be. It could be a screwdriver. Bonding shall not be required for luminaires that are listed for the application and have no non-current carrying metal parts, okay? So if you buy a luminaire and it is the type that go in it, it may be plastic and it mounts into this wet niche. Well, you're already bonded the wet niche, and the cord from the luminaire will have the requirements going up to the box anyway, so typically it's already going to be provided in it. So again, obviously there's no non-current carrying metal parts that need to be bonded, those isolated parts. If it's listed for the application and it's listed for pool lighting, then it's done, everything. So you can assume that if you buy it listed, it's all together. You don't have to do anything extra, okay? Lastly, per 680.23b6, this is a servicing requirement, by the way. It says, we're servicing a wet niche luminaire for inspection, relamping, and other maintenance. The length of the cord from the forming shell must be the adequate length to permit personnel to place the removed luminaire on the deck or other dry location. When performing maintenance on the luminaire, you're going to remove the positive clamping. Okay, the luminaire must be accessible without personnel having to enter or going into the pool water. Okay, so where wet niche luminaires are installed low in the footwell of the spa, okay, or pool, okay, it says the luminaire. So in a spa, if it's, how they put the luminaire down in the actually with the little stepping that's inside of the spa, for example, they put that down low. Then as long as you can lift that up and get that onto a seat that is dry, then you're okay. That'll be okay when it comes to the application. Okay, so it says where the wet niche is located low in the footwell of a spa, the luminaire is only required to reach the bench location. Okay, now where the spa can be drained to make the bench a dry location. So let's look at that at the code so you can kind of see the context of how it talks about it. And this is what it's talking about here. And this is the last part right here. Okay, this is there we go. I don't know why I wasn't sharing. So this is the last part. So this is spa locations. Okay. So you could have an integrated spa that's integrated with the pool, for example, right? So it says servicing, and this is what we just read, right? Now it says in spa locations, which could be integral to the pool. Now a spa, notice it doesn't say hot tub, right? It just says spa location. It says in a spa location where the wet niche luminaires are installed below or installed low on the footwell of the spa, it says the luminaire shall be only required to reach the bench location where the spa can be drained to make the bench location dry. Okay. If it can't be drained, or you're not going to drain it, or the desire is not to drain it, then you know what? You need to move that thing up so that you can get it up onto the dry deck. Okay. That makes more sense to be able to get it up. So this is what you do. So what do they do typically with these? Is that you'll have a cord, you'll get a certain length that comes with it. You're going to, typically, you would take the cord and you'd wrap it around the body of the luminaire portion that goes in the wet niche. So it wraps around it so that you can get it all back in there. And then it'll coil off as you pull it out and put it on the deck. And then when you want to put it back in, you coil it around it and you push it back in. You use the positive locking and you lock it in place. That's it. That's typically how those would work. Okay. All right. Next, let's move on to dry niching. 680.23c. This is a dry niche, exactly how it sounds. A dry niche luminaire shall be provided for provisions for drainage of water. Other than listed low voltage luminaires not requiring grounding, a dry niche luminaire shall have means to accommodate one equipment grounding conductor for each conduit entry. Okay, so let's go look at C1. And this is going to be inherent, by the way, in the construction of the product. So this is what we saw right here. So this is the construction. We're not going to control the construction. Construction of this is going to be by the manufacturer. Okay, so in a dry niche luminaire, it has to have a drainage for the water. That will be designed, again, in the dry niche luminaire. That's already be something that they'll take into consideration. It says, other than the low voltage lighting requirements, which, again, we don't require grounding, it says a dry niche luminaire shall have a means to accommodate one equipment grounding conductor for each conduit entry, okay, into this dry niche, all right, coming into the dry. This is already going to be taken care of by the manufacturer, by the way. Next, it says junction box. A junction box shall not be required for these dry niche luminaires, okay? They're not required for a dry niche luminaire. However, if it is used, if you want to use junction boxes, it shall not be required to be elevated or located as specified in 680.24a2. So you have some height requirements and distance. It's not required to meet that requirement for those junction boxes. If you're installing dry niches, only required for the wet niches when it comes to if you use junction boxes, okay? not required for dry niches. Okay. And again, short and sweet when it comes to these dry niches. Okay. And then no niches. No niches says a no niche luminaire shall meet the construction requirements of 680.23B3. So remind you that 680.23, let's see here, B3. So it says meet the requirements of B3, which is right here. So it's going to have an equipment grounding conductor in the cord. Well, that's pretty much going to be a given. It's going to be part of it anyway, so I don't have to worry about that. Those no niches, it'll meet that. And be installed in accordance with 680.23b in general. So 680.23b is the same as, let's see, 680.23b right here, following all the rules where applicable. Okay, follow all these same rules because it's making reference to it, right? For the no niche luminaire. Now, it says where connection to a forming shell is specified, the connection shall be to the mounting bracket. So there's a mounting bracket that comes with these no niche luminaires, and typically what that's going to do is that's going to mount directly onto the actual shell assembly that's designed to go into the pool. So they'll give you a mounting bracket that's going to be incorporated into the actual shell construction of that pool. Okay. And then of course we also have ones that are called through wall lighting assemblies. Okay. These are a lot of these types that you actually mount through the side of a wall of certain types of pools. And they'll actually screw. And I was hoping that I had a picture of one of these, and I don't think they do. Let's see, that's a picture we just showed. I was kind of hoping we had that's the deck box requirement, wiring methods and everything. So we're going to get to the branch circuits in a minute. I was hoping I had a picture, but it didn't have a picture. Okay, so we don't have a picture. So these are exactly how it sounds. They actually mount through the wall. So I'll come back to me just to kind of give you the visual. So you have the wall of the pool, depending on what type of pool it is. It could be a permanent installed pool, but it's made of a certain material or those metal type of framed pools that actually have the portals. And these are designed to go, they have kind of like a connector. It goes through an opening in the pool, and it has a female and a male. They mate together and they connect together tightly, and they sandwich the wall. That is considered what's called a through wall lighting assembly. Okay, that's what those are. They will actually penetrate through it. They're not the same as a wet niche, dry niche, or even a no niche, which gets mounted on the actual assembly. These actually will poke through the wall assembly, so it's a unique type of installation. Okay, you probably can Google and look and say, what is a through the wall assembly look like, and you'll probably get a picture of what one looks like. Now, it would have been nice to have one in link to show people different ones, but they don't. So, all right. So now let's see here. So that's all of our luminaires that we have. Just remember, and a summary of this would be wet niches. If it's brass or stainless steel, that can make the bond from the wet niche up to the junction box and all this type of things. That can make that bond. If it's PVC, then I need to install an 8-gauge down, insulated 8-gauge down. And again, that termination in the wet niche to a lug needs to be encapsulated. Let's see. So we've got that. If it is a dry niche, then all of that's going to be already figured into the piece of equipment. And only difference there is in the dry niche, it has to have an additional provision for equipment ground connection, that type of thing. So again, that's going to be already something the manufacturer takes care of. No niche, follow all the general rules in 680.23b, those type of things. But in general, those also come with their own installation requirements. Just follow those installation requirements. And then we have the through the wall type that will have mating components that actually sandwich like a connector in a lock nut, for lack of a better explanation. They're through the wall type of penetrations, that type of thing. Makes sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So now we're looking at the right here in construction, again, dry niche. We made that clear. They have to accommodate, again, a means for one equipment grounding conductor for each conduit entry. So if that type of thing. So depending on this dry niche, how many entries it has going into it, typically I only see them with one. But again, if it had multiple entries into this dry niche, then it has to have an equipment ground, a terminal to accommodate, okay, one for every entry, okay? And the other reason for this also, by the way, in case you ask, is because remember, it doesn't require a deck box. And a deck box requires a certain number of equipment ground terminals. Well, and it's usually based on the number of entries. Well, in a dry niche, remember, it doesn't require the deck box. So you could be coming into a dry niche and it could be looping out for some reason. So we need to have enough equipment ground connections that's going to accommodate the number of entries. And again, depending on the dry niche and the entries that the manufacturer give you, they're going to provide you that. And the manufacturer will take care of that, okay? And the big difference between a wet niche and a dry niche, again, is the water that's surrounding everything, right? So the wet niche has water surrounding the luminaire, okay? A dry niche is waterproof, and it's designed to allow relamping from the rear, by the way, unlike a wet niche, okay? A dry niche typically doesn't require a junction box, unless the manufacturer demands one for some reason, but a wet niche does typically have a junction box. However, when you're using a junction box, even if it's not required, okay, it still has to meet the rules. So even if you choose to use one for a dry niche application, and we're going to look at junction boxes, but if you choose to use one, even though it's not required, you still have to meet all of the rules for that junction box, okay? All right. Okay, so let's look at junction. Let's talk about that really quickly. Let's look at 680.23c. Well, no, we already did that. We kind of looked at that junction box requirement. We just kind of, that junction box. It's telling you whether or not you have to have a junction box for a dry niche, and you do not. But where you do have one, still got to follow the rules, okay? All right, let's see here. We already did no niche, okay? Let's see here. I was just trying to see if there's anything additional that I want to add to this. No, we'll talk about the branch circuits. All right. All right, so tell you what we're going to do. We're going to stop for today, even though we did not get to equipotential bonding. Again, because there's so much crap to cover, and we took up 30 minutes covering other stuff. So if I'm long-winded and you don't want to follow me, have a nice day. Mike Holt has a channel. So does other folks. But if you do want to come back, hopefully you'll come back tomorrow. So what we're going to do is, rather than spin the wheel today as a giveaway, I know y'all all did the hashtag. We're just going to do one big love giveness today. Down at the bottom, we're going to give it to everybody. Anybody that is willing to purchase the 2023 NEC Enhanced program today till the end of the day tomorrow, you are going to get the grounding and bonding as well. Okay? Okay? So, again, there you go. All right? So, because we're running so far over, it's almost 3 hours. I am not going to do a giveaway today. I'm sorry. If you just hung around just for the giveaway, womp, womp, womp. Till next time, folks, stay safe. Sorry I kept you so long. Till next time, God bless. Catch you Monday, where we definitely will talk about the branch circuits, and I promise you, we will get to equipotential bonding on Monday. All right? Promise. And promises made, promises kept. Till next time, stay safe. God bless. Hey folks, I mentioned this earlier in the show, but I always have to do it because there's always somebody that asks, and it's okay to ask, But when you go to Walmart, if your coupon expired last month, you can't ask them to honor it because they're not going to honor it. Okay. I can't help it. I've sold thousands of courses. This is for a special today till tomorrow. If you already have it, you're not getting in on the special. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. These are for people that purchase the 2023 extension. I run different specials, but I would have to give that to thousands of people. And I wouldn't be in business, and you were not going to have coffee hour anymore, and I'd have to close the doors. Can't do it. Only special right now for those that purchase the 2023 NEC Enhanced only, not the basic, Enhanced. Until tomorrow at midnight, we will give you the grounding and bonding course free. I'm sorry. I can't retroactively apply that to thousands of people. It's not going to work. Take care. God bless.